Howell Township Planning Board Special Meeting, August 31st, 2021. I hereby declare this special meeting of the Howell Township Planning Board to be open. Adequate notice having been given pursuant to the New Jersey Open Public Meeting Act in the following manner. First, on August 11th, 2021, a copy of said notice was mailed to the Asbury Park Press and the Star Ledger. Second, on August 11th, 2021, a copy of said notice was hand-delivered to the clerk of the Township of Howell. Third, on August 11th, 2021, said notice was posted in the office of the Planning Board and on the bulletin board in the Howell Township Municipal Building, 4567 Route 9, Howell Township, New Jersey. Members of the public will have a chance to ask questions and comment on applications once the chairman opens the hearing up for members of the public. If you wish to ask questions or comments on an application, you will need to use the raise your hand feature and we will bring you into the meeting one at a time. You will need to have audio and video capability. You will be sworn in and you will need to provide your name and address. For anyone calling in, you can press *9 to raise or lower your hand and *6 to mute or unmute yourself. This meeting is being videotaped for possible future broadcast on Howell Township TV 77. Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bavai has been excused. Mr. Dorado?
Here.
Mr. Husser?
Here.
Chief Kudrick?
Here.
Mr. Leggio?
Here.
Mr. Nicastro?
Here.
Councilwoman Richmond?
Here.
Mr. Seaman's been excused. Ms. Casper's been excused. Mr. Cristiano?
Here.
And Chairman Tannenhouse.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, could everybody please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? And unfortunately, we have too many reasons right now for a moment of silence for all of our first responders and those serving abroad and here, and those who have recently fallen. So everybody, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, correspondence.
We have no correspondence this evening.
Okay. All right, I guess we're going to see our application for this special meeting, case number SD-2990, FP Howell. Who's the attorney, please?
The attorney is Mr. Pape. And he provided me with a few of his professionals, so I'm just going to get them into the meeting.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and board members. I think I'm on. There we are.
You are.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Chair and board members. Kenneth Pape of the firm Highover and Pape, attorney for your applicant, FP Howell LLC. As indicated in the opening remarks by the chairman, this is a special hearing for the FP Howell application. The FP Howell application is a residential development that includes a 30% set aside for affordable housing purposes. Before I begin the substantive presentation, may I ask that you confirm receipt of our notices and confirm that the notices were adequate for the board to take jurisdiction this evening?
Chair? You're muted.
It appears everything is in order and the board has proper jurisdiction.
Thank you.
Thank you. Your applicant is FP Howell LLC. Scott Caruso is the managing member and principal who is with us this evening. The plans were prepared by Stuart Challoner, professional engineer and professional planner, who will present the plans. We also have with us other professionals who worked on this matter, including the architects for the plans that are before the board. I did not intend to call them, but they are available if there are questions that need to be addressed. And there's Mr. Nicholas Vetterisi, who is the traffic engineer who worked with Stuart, is also available if his testimony is required. And before we go into a presentation of the plans by Mr. Challoner, Mr. Chair, and with your permission, I'd like to include in the record a description of all that went before this evening, all of the steps that were involved. Well, I can't do all of them. I can summarize the steps that brought us here this evening, going back just about 3.5 years ago. And that's when our clients became involved. Prior to 3.5 years ago, the Township of Howell learned that they had an affordable housing obligation and went about taking the necessary steps to address that. One of the things that they did is entertained applications by responsible developers. And in the fall of 2018, the FP Howell application was presented to the township for their consideration as affordable housing project. And on November 20th of 2018, the governing body approved entering into a developers agreement with FP Howell. And that developers agreement was really the first of the documents that laid out the rules of what FP Howell would be permitted to do on the site. And there was a very comprehensive, almost 15-page document dated November 19th, 2018, entered into by and between the Township of Howell and FP Howell for the development of the property, very, very much the way we will present it to you this evening. In fact, that agreement, which ultimately was sent to the courts for the court's approval, included plans that were designed by Mr. Challoner, which showed almost exactly what we're presenting to you this evening. They weren't engineered, but the design was intact. After we entered into the agreement, after FP Howell entered into the agreement, it was necessary to present the agreement together with all the other agreements with other affordable housing developers to the court. And the court did conduct a fairness and compliance hearing and specifically made reference to the plans of FP Howell and the developers agreement, and found that it was a fair and an appropriate plan, and that it was consistent with Howell Township's requirements to provide affordable housing. And an order was entered in that matter in 2019. After the court found this project to be an acceptable part of the affordable housing program for Howell, Howell Township's professionals and the applicant then worked on creating an ordinance that set forth with specificity all of the bulk requirements, all of the requirements for the development of the property. And that ordinance was adopted by the township. And I'm looking for the date. That ordinance was adopted on November 12th, 2019. And there was a clarification of that ordinance that was adopted during the past 12 months. And as we come before you this evening, we come not as a first step, but as you can see, I think more like the 7th step in a very comprehensive program that began with Howell Township having an affordable housing obligation and FP Howell and others stepping up with affordable housing programs. This project that we present to you is a combination of single-family homes and multifamily homes with 30% of the total number of homes to be for the purpose of satisfying Howell Township's affordable housing obligation. There's very low, low, and moderate, all as required by the courts and all as set forth in the ordinance. Mr. Chair and board members, thank you for allowing me to put that, make that part of the record. I think it's so important for everyone who is listening and will be participating to know that this evening is not about us coming before you and trying to negotiate. This evening is your applicant presenting an application that is consistent with all the commitments that have been made to the township over the last 3.5 years. So with that, if Stuart Challoner could be sworn, and we'll have his credentials made part of the record, and we'll begin our substantive presentation.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Please state and spell your name for the record.
My name is Stuart Challoner, Challoner. My work address is 201 Main Street, Toms River, New Jersey.
Okay, if you could qualify, Mr. Challoner.
I can. Before I'm reading from my notes, and I made a misstatement. The ordinances that were adopted require low and moderate, did not require very low on this project. I just want to correct my opening statement. Mr. Challoner, if you would share with the board your professional and your educational background.
Yes, I have a Bachelor in Science of Civil Engineering. I graduated in 1984. I've been practicing as a licensed engineer since 1989. I've owned my own firm in Toms River since 1995. I've appeared in front of Howell Township Planning Board for the last 15 plus years.
We'll accept your credentials.
Thank you. Mr. Challoner, if you just, for the record, if you would identify that your licenses are in good standing as of today's date.
Yes, that's correct. Both planner and engineer license are current.
Thank you. And if you could share with the board that you are the primary engineer designer of the project, including the exhibits that were attached to the settlement agreement, the developers agreement, and were presented to the court.
Yes, I am. I'm
And the
the
plan-
primary person. That's correct.
The plans that you prepared and are going to present this evening, that you prepared those plans.
Yes, Yes, I did.
Okay. I'm going to ask if you could, I think perhaps share with the board the exhibits that you will rely on to make your presentation. We could perhaps label them if we could start with the aerial photograph.
Yes.
Are these exhibits that were already submitted, or are they new for tonight?
No, they've been there for over a month.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
They've already been marked in as exhibits as well.
Correct.
If you could just reference the exhibit then. I think Eileen had distributed the exhibit list.
Yeah.
I can. Just give me a second. I'll grab that list.
Is this A19?
He has two. He has an overhead exhibit and a colorized aerial exhibit. He also has a colorized site rendering, so I'm not
Yeah.
sure which one.
Yeah, I think we're going to start with A18 overhead
Okay.
exhibit. Is that correct,
Go
Stuart?
ahead.
That is correct. But I don't have that sheet, those 4 pages that.
Do you want me to email them to you?
Well, I only have 4 exhibits, so
Okay.
I'm
If you
sure
tell me
Mr.
what
Pape
they
can
are, I
fill.
can.
Yeah, I'm sure Mr. Pape can fill in the blanks.
Okay.
All right. So can I share my screen now?
You can.
1 second. Share. All right, the first exhibit. Oh, let me get rid of this. How do I get rid of? There we go. Is my screen now available?
Yes.
The first exhibit is an overhead exhibit. It's entitled Views at Monmouth Manor for lots 166, 181, and 182, block 110. This exhibit is in 1 inch equals 500. And Ken, would you prefer I just listed all of them right away?
No. While this one is up, if you could just perhaps identify, you did the lot and the block, if you could just identify where our client's property is on the exhibits.
Okay, so this is an overall exhibit looking from the eye in the sky, looking down. You could see in the, I guess the north arrow is directly up on the page. You can see the interchange just to the east of our property. The property is identified in bright yellow. Just to the east of the property is the exchange for 195 and Route 9. Access to the property is off of Holst Corner Road, which turns onto Fort Plains Road. Our property has currently frontage only on Fort Plains Road and Sunnyside. Sunnyside is a residential street that runs from Fort Plains back to Route 9. The property is 102 acres, and it currently exists as 3 separate lots today, identified just earlier as lots 166, 182, and 181 in block 110. And again, this is just an exhibit, just giving you the general demographics of where the property is located. The second exhibit.
Mhm.
Let me zoom out. The second exhibit is another aerial photograph. Oh, let me zoom out one more time. Oh, it is zoomed out. Is another aerial photograph. However, this scale of this drawing, to make it a little bit more clarity, is scale of 1 inch equals 100. Again, is the views of Monmouth Manor. It's identified for the same lots 166, 181, 182, block 110. The property is outlined in light yellow. You could see the areas that there's 3 different colors that have been highlighted on the plan. The green is the NJDEP regulated wetlands. There's a wetland corridor that runs through the eastern portion of the property. There's an existing stream that's highlighted in a cyan color. And you can see that the property is an existing farmstead. The majority of the property is an existing farmstead. It does have an existing residential structure that fronts on Fort Plains Road. That is part of the 181 property, or lot 181. But the existing farmhouse, I believe, is vacant. The property was currently farmed. But there's no one living on the farm anymore. The white dots that you see in this aerial photograph is as a result of us doing soil borings back in, I think this exhibit is 2019, and that was the locations of our soil pits when we did our preliminary studies on this property. They just happened to be at the time when the photograph was taken by Google. The third exhibit.
Challoner,
Yes, sir.
could you just help me out, please? Could you just use your pointer and kind of trace out the area that's going to be the wetlands area, please? Let's
So
see
the wetlands
two
area-
sets of green lines.
Is my pointer
Yeah.
visible?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's 2 different types of wetlands on this property. There's what they call ordinary resource value, which is this long finger. There's an existing drainage ditch that was utilized by the farmer to drain the back, or I guess it would be the eastern portion of the farm. So there's a drainage ditch that was installed by the farm that drains out all the way out into the creek. So that is because that area is less than 75 foot in width, the DEP flagged that as ordinary resource value. No buffers are required along that drainage ditch. The remaining portion of the wetlands highlighted on the western side of the wetland corridor is what they call intermediate resource value. The DEP flagged that for a 50-foot riparian buffer or 50-foot wetlands buffer. And then there's another wetlands line on the eastern portion of the property. You can see the farmer actually cleared a portion of the woods through a trail from one farmstead to the other. There's an upland portion that's also been identified by the wetlands expert. So there's a small portion of uplands on the eastern portion of the property, although the applicant is not proposing any development in that area. All the development is, it's kind of unique. Farmers have a pretty good tendency where they could grow crops, and you can almost see the farm almost exactly emulates the wetlands line as identified by the DEP.
So is it fair to say that all of the land to the right of that green line that your pointer's on right now is remaining existing as is?
That's correct. The only disturbance that's going to be through that area, the applicant is obtaining sewer access on the end. We worked out with the township in previous meetings with the township engineering department and the sewage department. We ran a 10-inch sewer main down Fifth Avenue. So there's a new sewer line that was just recently installed within the last year. Our access to sewer is from Fifth Avenue. It'll actually come out, and it'll be a small easement through that wetlands corridor, and it comes out into the farm area. But that would be the only disturbance, and that will be allowed to grow back.
And the DEP was okay with that disturbance?
Yes, everything is. Well, we don't have all those permits in hand at the moment. Those permits are still pending. We're working on floodplain management permits and wetland permits with the DEP currently, but they've all been filed. They've all been there for the last year. The property, since this property was not in a sewer service area, I might be getting a little bit too technical, but since this property is not currently in a sewer service area, the applicant was required to amend the wastewater management plan at the DEP. And that process takes over 12 months. So we've been working on that process for about the last 14 months. And that is working its way through all the different agencies that have to sign off. And then once that gets signed off, then we'll finalize our DEP permits. But all the DEP permits are in the DEP and pending. We're just waiting for the water quality management plan to be amended so we can finalize everything.
Appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Okay.
Stuart, before you go to the next exhibit, if I may, if you could confirm that the structures that are on here, the farmhouses and other structures, all of those will be removed from the property?
Yes. So the farmhouse, or for the original farmhouse that I'm circling with my cursor at this time, there's an existing gravel driveway that comes off of Fort Plains Road that used to service the farm. All those structures will be removed as part of this application. There's also an existing house on Fort Plains Road, and that will be in the portion of the new buffer that we're going to install. So that house is being purchased as part of this property or project, and that house will also be demolished and turned into greenscape. And then the corner lot, lot 182, it's a vacant lot today, and it's going to remain. The majority of that will be remaining vacant. We purchased that for, I'll get into it, but it was for the realignment of Sunnyside Road.
Okay. So if you would, I think if we go to your third exhibit, and I think the best way to start is just to do an executive summary of what our client's project consists of.
Okay, so this exhibit is really the meat and potatoes of the project. This is the site rendering. I don't know why my screen just eliminated the title. Oh, there it is. The site rendering, again, for lots 166, 181, and 182, block 110. This image was drawn at a scale of 1 inch equals 100. It shows, again, the orientation is a little different. North is going to the upper left corner of the property. And just if you can see my cursor, that's generally the direction of north. Fort Plains Road, I made parallel for the exhibit. Fort Plains Road is along the lower portion of the site rendering. You'll see that we have on the northern portion of the property, there are 72 single-family lots that are going to be proposed. Then in the center portion of the property, there's 155 townhouse structures. And then on the very southern portion of the property, there's 92 COA units being proposed. And the property will have 2 access points off of Fort Plains. Both access points will have a center island of landscaping. They'll both be prominent. There will be signage at both entrances. And then the applicant is proposing a new streetscape plan along Fort Plains Road, along with the widening of Fort Plains Road. Approximately, I think we're increasing the width of Fort Plains Road 14 feet.
So if we, for months, if not years, you have been working on the plan and working with the township professionals and also working with the township commissions, the Shade Tree Commission, Environmental Commission, and Fire Chief Lewis. I'm going to ask if we could go through the elements of a site plan, just and touch all of those elements for the record. And I'd like to begin with grading. What was the necessary grading for this site to accommodate this residential development?
So the existing farm site, well, first we prepared a project that is very close to being balanced. We're not proposing any large imports of fill. The existing grading of the property, the northern portion of the property is currently high. The southern portion of the property is currently low. So we're borrowing from the north. We're going to move it to the south to make a balanced project. We have a large wet basin that's being proposed in the center of the property for stormwater management. So we're getting a lot of fill out of the wet basin to ensure that we have adequate fill on site for the development. So again, we're not proposing a large import for this project. This project was designed to be balanced. The single family lots are proposed on a new roadway system that will be compliant with the township and RESA standards. We'll have a 50-foot right of way. We'll have curbs and sidewalks. The grading has been prepared to ensure that the lots are not steep. They're all going to be meet the township grading requirements. The grading plan around the townhouses, we put a lot of drainage in the rear of the townhouses to ensure that in the back courtyards, we'll have adequate drainage to make sure that we weren't dependent upon long swales to get drainage out to areas out to the street. We wanted to make sure that we had adequate areas. It always seems whenever we do a multifamily development, the drainage becomes a big problem, a big complaint among the residents. So we ensured that we put adequate drainage throughout the entire property to make sure that there was no low points and no areas of ponding behind the multifamily. Yep.
Who has to maintain that drainage?
So the drainage, there will be a homeowners association for the project. The way I understand it might be a little bit high, a little bit above my pay grade, but the homeowners association will be broken down into 3 phases. There will be a single family phase, a multifamily, what I'll call townhouse phase, and a affordable housing phase, but it'll all be governed by one homeowners association, and they will be maintaining all the drainage on site.
Stuart,
Make it short, Mr. Pape. The township does not have to maintain the drainage system.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could go back for just a little bit, then I'd like to do that drainage question in its entirety. Just the one question I wanted to ask Stuart about grading before we went into the details of drainage. So when you regrade the site, as you just described, borrowing from one side to the other, if you could just confirm that the drainage patterns that exist are not going to be modified. Water is still going to travel in the direction that it was originally designed to.
For the most part, yes. I mean, that was our original plan. The plan has since been revised to eliminate, originally, our application that was in front of the board, we had 2 drainage basins in the front. The property has a high point in the middle, so a large portion of the farm drains to Fort Plains Road. We have now redesigned the project to pick up all the drainage, including portions of Fort Plains Road that will get routed. Actually, you can actually see the drainage line being routed to the new basin in the back. We lowered the basin in the back to allow us to address the road widening on Fort Plains, to pick up that drainage, move it to the back. It'll all be discharged to the existing stream that's along the rear portion of the property. When we went out and did our last site visit during heavy rainfall, the farm today floods a portion of Fort Plains Road. Anybody that lives next to a farm doesn't, you would think a farm absorbs a lot of water, but because it's row crops, it actually has a high runoff value. So a lot of runoff comes to the property today, flows to Fort Plains. We are now addressing that and eliminating that flooding problem along Fort Plains, which is really close to the southern access point. And all that drainage is being routed to the back, and all of it will be discharged to the stream at a rate that currently goes to that stream today. So we're substantially reducing the amount of runoff off this property after development.
So let's, if we could, we'll go into the drainage. I think the 3 most important questions that I can ask of you before you describe the drainage system. One is, are you aware that the township has stormwater design standards, and did you comply with those standards in your design?
Yes, this project, since this project's being reviewed for the DEP, we meet and exceed the township standards. I mean, the township standards require us to meet the best management practice from the DEP. And this is also being reviewed by floodstream management from the DEP. Yes, we meet the township standards, and we'll have to meet all the DEP standards.
Okay, so Stuart, my second question is, you're aware that the DEP has independent requirements for stormwater management. And if you place on the record that this also meets all of those DEP requirements.
Yes, it will be, yes.
And the one that I think is most important, and the chair is asked, is can we comply that the stormwater system that you've designed will be privately owned and maintained by association and creates no burden on the township?
That is correct.
Thank you. So if you wanted to, and I think you've already shared with us, but a little bit more would be valuable. We were brought to your attention was the flooding condition on Fort Plains Road. Had nothing to do with the development plans, but it was an existing condition. And if you could just, in layman's terms, identify how the proposed development improvements will substantially improve that condition.
So currently, a portion of the farm drains to a small culvert that is almost in the area where my cursor is right now, that crosses Fort Plains Road and continues in a westerly direction to a different stream than the one that's behind us. That culvert, I think it's a 12-inch, it's either a 12-inch or 15-inch. It's a small culvert. That culvert couldn't handle the large storm event. So once that culvert exceeded its capacity, the runoff from the farm would overflow the road and get to the stream down to the west by traversing the road. Our project now is we're picking up all the runoff of Fort Plains Road on our side of the road, because we're widening it up to the point of where you see this black line on the exhibit, and that's all going to get routed to the pond. And then, of course, we placed inlets along our project, so almost all of our project is picking up the runoff and sending it to the wet pond that we're proposing in the back. So we're substantially reducing the amount of runoff onto Fort Plains Road, and there will not be a flooding problem on Fort Plains Road after development.
So that the runoff from the farmland onto the roadway is going to be intercepted by that labyrinth of stormwater collection pipes and catch basins and sent towards the basin and towards the wetlands, and not on Fort Plains Road.
Right. We originally we designed the basin to be a dry basin, but then when we decided to eliminate the two front basins, and we wanted to pick up the runoff off of Fort Plains Road, which is actually lower than the back portion of our property. We needed to lower the basin. Because of water tables, it was easier to make it a wet basin. So we decided to make it a wet basin and make it a feature instead of a dry basin. It'll now contain water. The basin will be lined to ensure that it holds the water. Even in dry periods, when the water table is lower, the basin will still be a wet basin.
If you,
Go ahead.
no, but I'd like to go to the water and sewer supply. If you could just confirm on the water, I think an important element, we're going to have a potable water supply, but it's my understanding that you've built a looping system into it. If you could just spend a couple minutes on the water system and the looping element.
Yes, we met with New Jersey American Water in the early stages of our development. There's an existing utility easement to the property next door. We're going to take advantage of that utility easement and run a water main and connect into the water main at the end of the cul-de-sac that's on the adjoining property. And then there's also, we're going to extend the water main down Sunnyside and then into the property. So there will be a loop system. The whole property will be looped to the water system on New Jersey American Water.
And for firefighting purposes and for water supply, if you could share with the board why that's so important.
Well, it's important for firefighting, for absolutely. It's also a requirement from the DEP. Anything over 16 units requires a loop system. We far exceed the 16 units. So we were mandated to do a loop system. So, and we are compliant with those requirements. And again, it allows, if there's a breakage in a water main somewhere, the applicant or this developer would still have access to water from the loop system.
And if you could similarly describe in general terms the sanitary sewer system that you proposed, can you confirm that there'll be sanitary sewer facilities? Just executive description.
To make it, when we first laid out the sewer system, we were also going to take advantage of the utility easement to the cul-de-sac because there's actually sewer there. However, when we met with the township engineer department, they felt that this system was already overtaxed. So they asked us to investigate his alternate system. So again, it goes back to my first exhibit. We extended when Howell Township was doing the sewer improvements over on 4th and 5th Avenue, we approached the town and said that we would like to tie in on 5th. We modified that sewer on 5th Avenue. It was proposed originally to have an 8-inch sewer line to the Mercer, what do they call it? A collector system. And we upgraded that to a 10-inch line to allow us to tie this 319 unit development. So there will be a pump station proposed on the property, and which is located right here at the end of in the middle of the townhouse development. You can see my cursor is circling. There is going to be an on-site pumping system. Again, it's going to be maintained by the homeowners association. And then there's a force main that runs through the wetlands and will tie into an existing manhole that's already been installed at the end of 5th Avenue or 5th Street.
Could we go to the lighting plan? And just, if you could.
Mr. Pape,
Yes, sir.
if you wouldn't mind, I don't mean to dominate the meeting. So if any of the other members on the board have any questions for Mr. Challoner, please by all means speak up. But I would like to go back to the stormwater. I have a couple more questions, if you don't mind, please.
No, it's your
Please,
meeting.
please.
So I understand that you're redirecting some of the stormwater that used to run towards Fort Plains, and you're turning it and making it go east instead of going west to go into a different stream system. So it's my understanding that basins or collection basins at some point have an emergency spill. Can you discuss what happens when there is an emergency spill, and where does that water go? Does it go back into that original stream system? Does it go back into the stream system that's back in the wetlands? And if so, and it's all being now redirected to a different stream system, have you like, what does the requirement of the applicant to determine how much that extra water is going to do to those downstream properties from that particular stream, please?
Well, so that's a great question. So to answer your first phase of that question, the applicant is proposing a emergency spillway that abuts the wetland corridor. So it will discharge into the large wetlands behind us. However, the volume of water and quantity still has to meet the guidelines of what goes there today. So if I just use a round number, let's say 50 cubic feet per second, is the 100-year flow event that currently flows off this property. And again, it currently flows down the ditch that the farmer built. And you could see that the ditch is just to the south of where our proposed pond is. And our discharge point is where for the pond is, I'm circling it with a cursor right now. So it mimics where it goes today. However, the applicant, even though the area, we're redirecting areas to that, we can't take credit since that currently doesn't flow there today, that our basin has to be oversized to handle that storage volume to ensure that what flows downstream is still the reduction of what currently goes there today. So for like a 2-year storm event, which is a storm that happens once every 2 years, so that's a pretty major storm event, the applicant still has to reduce 50% of that storm event. And then the 10-year is 75% and 100-year is 80%. So, and that's what currently flows there today. So again, we're only allowed to take the consideration of what portion of the farm currently goes to the back. Those are our guidelines or our target numbers that we have to meet. And then the applicant's required to oversize everything else to make sure that they're met. And there's storage volume because it's a wet basin. It's a large wet basin. And again, the basin's oversized because one, we needed the dirt. It helps us with the, to keep the balanced project. And it also, provides great stormwater management to have a large basin. So the applicant is addressing that, and we do have to meet those guidelines, both at the township level, and the county will be looking at, has to approve that also. And then the state also has to approve that. So there's 3 sets of eyes to ensure that those guidelines are met.
Well, if I could put that into layman's terms, in a nutshell, there's no more water going into that stream than there is presently now. That's correct. The quantity, even in a
Yes.
100-year storm.
The 100-year storm, it would still have to meet the 80% reduction of what gets there today.
Is there any need to keep water in that stream? Is there any wildlife or anything like that that requires some of that water to continuously get into that stream?
So the answer to that is, I'm not a wildlife expert, but the water will be still going there. It's going to just be discharged at a very slow rate. So
you're still discharging water out of that basin, just at a controlled rate.
Absolutely. Yes. It'll have the water surface elevation is a constant water surface elevation, except in a storm event. Then it flows, it'll rise up 3-4 feet inside the basin, and it'll have different various outlets in an outlet control structure. So the 2-year storm event will probably flow through a 3-inch orifice. The 10-year storm event will go through a larger orifice. And then the 100-year storm event will flow through a weir. That's typically what we design. And all those outlet structures are designed to ensure that at that depth of flow in that basin, it discharges at a certain rate that meets that 80% reduction, 75% reduction for the 10-year storm, and a 50% reduction for the 2-year storm. But the water will still get there. It'll still feed the stream. It just won't inundate it with a flood.
Great, thank you.
Stuart.
Yes.
Now, what happens if the water naturally wants to go back to the east, headed towards Four Plains Road? You're going to take this 102 acres and, you know, cut it down, you know, and new streets and new grades and everything. What happens if the ground wants the water to flow that direction naturally, like we see in so many other cases, going towards, you know, a natural stream that's been in the ground for hundreds of years? What happens then if that
You mean
water
like-
wants to go down?
You mean
That
like
way.
groundwater, or I'm not like that. So we're regrading the property. We're putting in drainage structures, inlets, and that is all being collected, and it will be collected and discharged into the wet pond.
Yeah, you're forcing it to the retention pond.
Correct. We're
Okay.
redirecting it to the retention pond.
But by changing the land, you know, the natural flow of this land, there's no concerns that some of this water isn't going to make its way to Four Plains Road and cause a problem like it does now when we have heavy rains?
No, I think that's the purpose of us putting in the stormwater management system and changing those drainage patterns to ensure that it doesn't get to. In other words, it's not going to, it won't flow uphill. I mean, it's all being directed downstream.
Well,
will
we
be
hope,
toward-
right?
Yeah, it'll be directed towards the pond.
I just have one other question for Mr. Pape. When this development was first proposed, wasn't it 259 units?
There was an increase in the number of units when the town asked the applicant to buy additional lands. And the applicant did, and the developer's agreement was then amended. I don't remember what the first number was, sir, but there was an amendment.
If it was 259 and we're at 319, so we added 60 units then,
I'm
if
gonna
that's
see
if that's the number, right?
there was an amendment to the developer's agreement that identified that. That was one of the written agreements with the town.
And the agreement was for what? For more low income, affordable, or single family townhouses? How did that work?
The,
As far as coming up with 60 more units.
Mr.
Yeah.
Pape,
yes, who's,
for me, the most important thing for me to answer that question while you're looking that up would be what was agreed to by the courts when you guys brought all your documents to the courts and your final applications.
yes. The plan that we're presenting to you is the plan that the courts approved that was part of the settlement. The project has 30% affordable units, or whatever the number of units that was, it's a 30% set aside. And so what you have is the number that is before the board tonight is the number that's in the settlement agreement, the developer's agreement, the court order, and in the ordinance.
And this agreement that was made with the courts, I know we keep using the word spot zoning, but it isn't it really, you know, inclusionary development? Isn't that really what it is?
Well, I don't use the term spot zoning for this type of a project. I think that's not a correct standard. This is an inclusionary project. An inclusionary project is one where the affordable elements are part of the same market rate element. So it is an inclusionary element project. The ordinance that was written was part of what was approved by the court. So we are all working from that ordinance. And the ordinance specifically set the zone and the bulk standards and the design standards. And Mr. Chair and board members, we certainly would be pleased to answer questions. I did have a structure of presenting the site plan to you. And with permission, I would like to go back to that structured presentation. Stuart will not be finished until all of your questions are addressed, but I think,
Thank you.
is that okay, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
I actually had a question on the basins.
Sure.
What type of aeration systems are going to be in the basin?
So the at the moment, we're not proposing aeration systems. This project exceeds normally you're required to install aeration if you have less than 20 acres. This project has close to 40 acres going to the basin. It far exceeds the minimum requirements for the aeration. It's not required. It's not required by the best management practice from the DEP.
I have a question, sir.
Sure.
Was a perk test performed on this property?
Yes, actually, if you look at the, here, I'll put this exhibit. Each one of those white dots was a location of a pit test bore and percolation test. However, that the, and it looks like it's polka dotted. And the, it is a wet pond. They're not, I mean, the pond itself will be lined, so it's not gonna allow any permeability into the ground for where the pond is. It's gonna be a lined pond. Because generally, it's funny, you know, when we design wet ponds, they always seem to, you know, if we just rely on the clay layer, it always seems to dry out. So we like to put the liners in and make sure that it stays a wet pond, and the water levels are kept at the required water levels to ensure that they don't go low on water.
What were the results of the perk test?
Where the pond was actually, there was percolation throughout the whole property. There was over, I think there was over 20 borings that were performed. Where in particular are you asking?
The whole property. I'd like to know at least the average, or
there is a drainage report that's submitted that has the percolations in it. I don't have them in front of me, but I think all the borings had permeable subsoils, you know, below a confining layer. In the areas that we are doing recharge, like roof recharge, each one of those will have the DEPs requiring individual test bores to ensure that they meet the permeability requirements. All of them will exceed the minimum requirements. So you know, it's more, it depends on the area. I think it varies from, you know, 2 inches per hour to 20 inches per hour.
okay. I'd like to ask a question about the sewer also. 10-inch line going through the wetlands. Are there other homes being connected to that, or is this solely for this project?
It's solely for this project, and the line that the 10-inch line is on 5th, just so maybe I didn't clarify clearly enough. The 10-inch line is a gravity line that the township installed in conjunction, anticipating that this project was going to drain to 5th Street. The line from the pump station to the 10-inch line through the wetlands is just a 4-inch poly force main. So it's just a 4-inch line because it's under pressure. It doesn't require the 10-inch.
And I also have questions on Fort Plains Road. Is there a requirement for curbs?
Yes, we are providing curbs and sidewalk along the frontage of Fort Plains Road. It's shown on the subdivision plans, which I can put up if you want to see it on the screen.
Well, I know there's going to be busing for children, and I'd like to see how the curbs are going to be cut in for them also.
So let me hold on. Let me get a plan up for you. Give me 1 second. This is sheet 7. I think this is, I'm hoping this is, sheet 7. So this is sheet 7 of the set that's being reviewed tonight. And I just zoomed into this would be the southwest portion of the property. This is Fort Plains Road. It's running straight up and down on the screen at the moment. This is included in your set if you want to look at it. you'll see that the property is widening the road to ensure that there's a 15-foot from center line to the new edge of pavement. And the applicant's proposing curb and sidewalk along the entire frontage. And there's a substantial road widening because it's, Fort Plains Road towards the north. You could see that the hatched area on this exhibit shows the area of widening because of the, Fort Plains Road is like a farm street that has been improved over times. It's not in the center of the road currently today. It actually favors the other side of the street. So there's a portion of our property that we're widening the road approximately 8 feet to get to the 15 feet from center line to meet those requirements. So there will be a substantial road widening. And then again, there's to be sidewalk and curb along our entire road improvement. Does that answer?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
May we proceed, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please, Mr. Pape.
Okay. Thank you. Stuart, briefly, if you could just describe the lighting plan for the project, the type of lights that are proposed, and then if you could confirm that the previous waiver for the light intensity is withdrawn and that the applicant will comply with the lighting intensity requirements of the town's ordinance.
Yes, that's correct. So that the applicant will enter into an agreement with the JCP&L to install light fixtures. They'll be installed throughout the entire development. The original plan exceeded the township standards and it required a waiver. We will revise the plan to meet the 0.3 foot candles minimum throughout the property and ensure that we meet all standards of the township for lighting. We're not seeking any waivers for lighting.
And I think if we could talk about the landscaping plan and various elements of the landscaping plan and the perimeter landscaping, the street tree landscaping, and the basin and dumpster landscaping.
Before you go on, can I go back to lighting?
Sure.
One of the issues we have with lighting, it's difficult with these type of developments. The residential section were just single family homes, regular streets. We typically ask for the 0.4 foot candle average. That's what we see with the JCP&L light fixtures. But then the issue comes up in the other section of the project where you have parking. So your parking lots will be under the 0.5 foot candles that we typically like to see for parking stalls. Can you maybe discuss how you could deal with that? I mean, the driving area of that wouldn't have to be 0.5, but we do like to see the stalls lit at 0.5.
I can put on the record that the applicant is more than happy to meet and with your professionals to ensure that we can have the 0.5 foot candles anywhere that there's a guest parking or parking for the COA units. And then for the residential development in the northern portion, I could reduce the light foot candles to 0.4 to meet the township standards.
Yeah, 0.4 average.
Right.
Typically over there, but yeah, so that's fine as long as it's understood that this southern side would be lit, a little bit higher as far as their foot candles, due to the fact you have parking stalls.
Right. Well, I think that's why we exceeded that requirement because we did light up that area. So probably what the revision will the plans will probably stay close to what was originally submitted for the COA and just slightly reduced for the remaining portion of the single family.
Okay.
That's fine.
Stuart, quick question, and I'm sure it's in the plans. I just didn't see it. Are the light fixtures the typical Cobra JCP&L fixtures?
They are JCP&L fixtures. That's correct. And if the township wanted it to be the colonial, I mean, it's as long as it meets the JCP&L gives, I think, 5 different light fixtures.
Correct. But
So
that shouldn't be a
had
township
preference.
decision. That should be a planning board decision.
I
So
mean,
I'm just-
yeah. If the township had a preference, it doesn't, it doesn't The coverage is basically the same. We're not, we were not proposing, I don't think our fixtures were the 30-foot tall Cobra.
That's a good question, Mr. Nicastro. If all the other utilities are private and need to be managed by the HOA, are the roadways also considered private?
So I can answer the roadways. So the applicant submitted a final plat. The intention was that the roadways for the single family homes on the northern portion, we were dedicating, because they're single family and they're going to be in fee simple lots. We were going to dedicate the right of way to the township. So those would be township owned streets, just for the single portion. And then on that final plat, all the common space, all the townhouse units would all be on one single lot, and that would be the multifamily lot. So we bifurcated the final plat into two sections. There's a single family section and then a multifamily section. The multifamily section will all be privately owned because they're not streets. They don't meet the standards, the township standards of streets in terms of the right of way. There's no right of way. But the single family, clearly they're fee simple lots. They'll be separated by a right of way, and that right of way, we are proposing that to be dedicated.
Correct.
So what would the board, does the board have a preference as far as these fixtures? Because that is always an issue we come up with reviewing. Most plans in Howell have stayed at the 30-foot tall Cobra. However, a lot of neighborhoods have moved towards that, town and country fixture, but in Howell, we've kept it at Cobra as that's what it's, it seems like the township wanted.
Well, we could the colonial one, correct me if I'm wrong, they produce a ton of glare, in my opinion. What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the difference is they look nicer than a 30-foot high Cobra head, but those would probably be better for glare for sure.
What are the other three options look like?
Well, there's colonial, there's like a fancy colonial, the Cobra, but the applicant's willing to do the Cobra. If the township is more familiar and happy with the Cobra, we'll just stipulate that we'll convert them to Cobra.
Yeah, I think Cobra LEDs are much better as far as glare for sure. They're just a much taller fixture.
Well, Sherry, are Cobra LEDs available? I don't believe.
Yes,
LEDs.
this year JCP&L went to LEDs, so it's now an option.
Yes,
Really?
That's correct. Yep.
Yes.
Good to know.
Yep.
So, Mr. Nicastro, your reason for bringing up the lights, are you looking for a different look, or are you looking for something that actually works and helps with reduced?
As Sherry said, it's always an issue at the planning board. The light fixtures, we typically try to get a different look. I understand why the township likes the Cobra lights, because we pay for the lights and the Cobra lights are a little cheaper. But I'm just glad to hear that JCP&L finally with BPU went to LEDs.
Yes,
so
finally.
Personally, yeah, I have no. I've been fighting that fight for years. So I have no preference. If the Cobras are what's best, then we'll go with the
we can leave it at that. Okay.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Then, Stuart, if you would, let's go to landscaping and talk about the landscaping plan.
So the applicant submitted a landscaping plan and a tree management plan. The applicant is proposing to have a streetscape along Fort Plains Road installed. We have two small landscape islands to enhance both entrance locations. In the single family, we're proposing street trees around the perimeter. The developer of the homes will obviously have a landscaping plan for each of the single family lots. We have for the townhouses, on the detail sheet, we have provided plantings for the townhouses, but we also provide street trees along the perimeter of all the parking lot and driveways. There's trash enclosures for the COA units that are on both ends of the main access parking area. And they also have an enhanced parking or landscaping around the trash. And I actually have a detail for that, because we upgraded that. That was one of the concerns of your board's professionals. We upgraded the trash enclosures. The trash enclosures will now be concrete block trash enclosures that will match the architectural feature of the building. And then what we enhanced the gates to have these wooden gates installed over the gate or over the doors to the trash enclosures, so they're a little bit more enhanced. And then we have a landscaping plan that we provided around both trash enclosures to ensure that they're properly screened.
Ms. Spiro, are the street trees on the right side of the sidewalks, and are they of the type that, 30 years, 40 years from now, the sidewalks aren't going to start heaving?
Well, I do have some comments on the species. Yeah, that is part of my technical report. So, and I'm sure they'll be more than happy to work with me on that.
Yes.
Absolutely.
The answer is yes.
Can you discuss the buffering? I know you have the width. What about the plant materials?
So the buffering, there's an existing buffer along the northern portion of our property. When the property adjacent was installed, they installed those trees are all going to remain. We're not disturbing any of the buffer that's along the northern portion. We have provided a 50-foot buffer strip along both adjoining properties. And then, of course, there is the 50-foot buffer in some areas greater than 50 feet along Fort Plains Road. We're not proposing any landscaping in those areas. Just the existing vegetation is going to remain.
Well, that's for the sides. If you could describe the landscaping along Fort Plains Road.
Fort Plains Road, the applicant agreed to provide a streetscape along Fort Plains Road that will meet with your approval of your board professionals.
Is the applicant exempted from the buffer requirements?
No,
No,
if the width of the buffer share was reduced in the zoning, but they're still obligated to put the requisite plantings. It's just it's a narrower space. So I'm not sure that they can do exactly what we anticipate in a 50-foot space, but definitely defer to you and your office to make sure that it actually provides in somewhat the same level of buffering as we would anticipate with a traditional major subdivision.
Right. So certainly, we're not expecting to see a 6-foot high berm in these buffers, but I don't really know how much vegetation is in these areas. I mean, I know there's a white pine row. That's the one you pointed out first. That is a pretty full buffer over there. But as far as along the road and on this corner piece by Sunnyside, as well as on the southern side, I don't really know if there's any vegetation there.
So I could say that I'm sure the applicant, although he's online, I don't want to speak to him, but we can meet with you to walk the perimeter of the property. Any areas that is deficient of buffers, we'll be happy to install additional plantings to ensure that those buffers are met.
sure.
Along the entrance to Sunnyside, there is a large
there's some
wooded area in that area now, but it's also an area subject that the township, is my understanding, the township wants to actually do a realignment of Sunnyside on the Fort Plains. So that was something that one of the reasons why we didn't touch that area, because it would all be coming out.
But Ms. Spiro, we would be pleased to follow your direction. We do not, we have no exemption from the buffer provisions of the ordinance. Our dimensions are set forth in our ordinance, but the buffer landscaping, there's no exemption. There's some exemption related to the tree replacement.
Right.
There's no, but on 100+ acre property, we're clearing approximately 3 acres in total. So that's not a major element. But I think that the best way to address it, if you're satisfied and the board is, we'd be pleased to meet with you as we have on other projects and to work out an appropriate landscape plan We're not looking for relief on the landscape plan.
Mr. Pape and Mr. Challoner, I just want to say that the ordinance does require the 25-foot vegetative buffer, and that is how it's shown on the site plan. It's called a proposed 25-foot vegetative buffer. So I think the question was what would actually be planted in the proposed buffer, but based on the rendering and based on, I guess, the landscape plan, it doesn't look like anything as you're relying on landscaping that's off-site, which I don't think was the intent.
No, no.
Agree 100%, Jordan. Definitely was not the intent.
No, and we agree too. The landscaping in there will comply with the buffer requirements, and we would be pleased to work with Bureau to come up with the planting materials.
Okay, so I mean, it will be significant as far just because of the length of these buffers, not, you know, even if you put a few trees per lot here, it's a, you know, a long stretch. Another concern of mine was the maintenance of these areas. So just even, for instance, the single family homes, their lots stop. And then beyond that, I suppose that's going to be the HOA's property, correct? Part of the buffer.
That's correct.
Yeah, so, you know, preferably, it would be best not to have it as a regularly manicured lawn. It's, you know, requires more chemicals and mowing activities that we really don't need. I don't know if that's something that they could designate certain areas that get maintained like a standard lawn, maybe more towards the frontage, but in the back, is it possible to do some sort of native seed mix and only mow it once a year? It just seems like a lot of area to maintain as a lawn.
That would be fine. We would, we'll revise the plan to provide your suggestions.
Okay.
I think, yeah, and first, Ms. Chair, I think we would want to meet with you to figure out which areas are most appropriate for each.
Okay.
Ken, may I just, I want to get something on a record. It's not the planning board that is giving you the relief from the 50-foot buffer. This was part of the developer's agreement.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And can you explain why? I'm assuming it's part because you're widening the road, but I want to put it on the record how this reduction in the buffer came into place.
Mr. Nicastro, I was not physically in the hearings where the bulk standards were created, but the goal was to get to, I know that the goal was to get to a certain number of affordable units that the municipality had. This project created affordable units for the municipality to address a portion of their responsibility. And from that, the number of units was identified. The project was designed, and then the project was redesigned a couple of times to create the greatest greenland perimeter. And what you have is what is the end result. And then it was memorialized in the ordinance, and it was accepted by the court. So, you know, we're not asking for anything there's no waiver for the dimensions of the buffer. And I hope we made it clear, we are not asking for waivers on the landscape material either.
No, you did. I just want to be clear that, you know, how this came to fruition.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
Yep.
And just so the along the north portion, this is a 50-foot strip that we provided a 50-foot. What we wanted to have was a 50-foot buffer to ensure that, you know, there was not going to be somebody building a shed. Like currently, you know, in other developments, when we put buffers on or easements on homeowners' properties, homeowners have a tendency to think, this is my property, I'll do whatever I want with it. And next thing you know, there'll be a shed in the buffer. So we put the property lines at the 50-foot or 50-foot offset of the boundary to ensure that there was going to be a maintained 50-foot buffer. Along the southern portion, the buildings themselves are actually 60 feet from the property line. So, you know, again, our intent was to have a minimum of at least 50 feet of green area, whether it's grass, wooded, or whatever, but it would be some you know, substantial portion behind each unit to the boundary of the properties. Along Fort Plains, we meet and exceed the 50 everywhere.
And if you, I think you may have, but if you could just talk about the landscaping. You talked about the basin becoming a feature, and it's now a landscape feature. If you could just briefly describe the landscaping and how it enhances the appearance of the basin.
Obviously, the basin is no longer a dry basin; it's going to be a wet basin. So the intent now is we're going to enhance the basin with landscaping around the perimeter. The back portion where you don't see trees, that's because that's where the emergency spillway is, and it also abuts a large wooded area of the wetlands. We also are proposing a pedestrian walking path along the basin that will go around the backs of the homes in the back. And actually, there's an exhibit for that walking trail. This is the walk-in trail exhibit. Comes off of Crimson Terrace. We put guest parking next to the walk-in trail, so people will have the ability to park there. They can walk, they can sit along the perimeter of the pond, and then it ties back in to the single family, to the sidewalk system of Riverwood Drive. It ties back in, so there will be a pedestrian walking path to provide some passive recreation to allow this new water feature that we're going to install onto the property.
I mean, Mr. Challoner, will it be lit by bollard lighting at all, or is it closed at night?
To tell you the truth, I didn't anticipate light in it. That was not something that we weren't thinking about bringing electric to the back to the back. So no, we were not going to light it.
Mr. Challoner, I know there was a comment in my letter, and I appreciate the exhibit. Is this something that you could actually put onto your plan set should the board act favorably on the application?
Yes, of course, yes.
And then I just wanted to mention, and I know you kind of are finished with this piece, but while we were talking about the buffering and you were talking about how the property lines, especially of the singles, end before the buffer, one of the requirements in our ordinance is that any kind of easement, whether it be a perimeter buffer, wetlands buffer, stream corridor buffer, et cetera, be demarcated with like markers.
The applicant will be willing to install the 75-foot separation. We'll put the markers in per the ordinance. The only relief that we're seeking, Jennifer, is the areas that are part of that buffer that go well beyond the area of development. We like to only concentrate it along the area where the proposed development is. Since this property is such a large, we're only developing on like 45% of the property. So we would like to be able to start by the single family and put the markers along the perimeter of the proposed development spaced at the 75 feet, if that's.
I mean, that's fine with me, but I would defer to Jordan on that. I mean, so as far as CME is concerned, if they're fine with that as well, I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure that it's demarcated in some way. Because as you correctly indicated, especially along single family, there's a lot of creep that has the potential to occur, and the markers, at least in the event that there's an issue, give us the opportunity to say, here's the marker, you're beyond that, or what have you. So as long as Jordan is okay with it being around the perimeter of the developed area, I'm fine with that.
Thank you.
And that will be on your final plat as well, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and then there was a comment in one of the reports about the wetlands. The wetland markers, believe it or not, are a requirement of the DEP. So the applicant's going to be required to install those markers as well. So,
hey, Brian?
Yes, sir.
Brian, does anyone else on the board have an issue with, with stuffing 319 units on this on this 45% portion of the 102 acres? Does anyone else have an issue with all these units stacked on top of each other like this? It just seems overwhelming. I understand they had to stay away from certain areas of the property because of wetlands and buffers, but it's 319 units. It just seems excessive. I understand we got the affordable aspect of it, the COA. So 30% of whatever they came up with had to be the affordable. But no one else has an issue with stuffing 319 units on this small little piece right here on a back road in Howell. With going
That's
up
a
the
little
road,
unfair
I
to
don't
say
know
too, John.
if you know,
Yeah, let me
a
see.
little west of this project, when we cross over the four-way stop at Hols's Corner, they're putting up like 350 apartments on the Jackson side, which is only like a half a mile away. Are we not concerned with overflow of everything? Changing the grades of all these properties and, the traffic. I know we're going to get to traffic. I know we're going to get to all this other stuff, but I just have a problem with it being 319 units. I just don't understand.
So
Yeah.
I want to ask a question of Mr. Pate, because I'm not sure we have the jurisdiction to address some of those concerns. Mr. Pate.
Yes, so
It is if I could just get it started with what I think we were concerned with here. It is my understanding that when this plan was developed, it brought to the courts to be in compliance with the court required affordable housing. Again, this all comes down to the fact that the state lost in an affordable housing case that requires all of the towns to meet a certain amount of affordable housing units. That this whole neighborhood or plan was submitted to the courts, including all of the single family homes. Is that a fair statement, or am
Mr. Chair, I think I can help out here. So I think there's two things at play. One is we have to understand, as you're talking about, the evolution of how this project came to be. But second is we have to understand what this board's jurisdiction is.
Right.
So you are correct. I mean, the affordable housing litigation and the Mount Laurel concept goes back to the 1970s, and it has progressed since the 1970s. There have been, I think, 5 major Supreme Court decisions. We're up to Mount Laurel 5 now, I think, on how to calculate what's known as fair share. You're absolutely correct. There was a recent, well, I'm not sure how recent anymore, but the last Supreme Court case definitively stated that there was still a fair share requirement for municipalities. The Supreme Court basically said COA doesn't function anymore. It doesn't meet, it doesn't do anything. It transferred jurisdiction to the courts. It required municipalities, if they wanted to proactively plan, to file declaratory judgment actions with the court with compliance plans. If they chose not to, then they were subject to builder's remedy litigation, which essentially means the developers get to develop what they want, where they want, how they want, with little to no input from the municipality. Howell took the lesser of the two evils, which was the responsible decision, and decided that it would plan to the extent it was permitted to by the courts as to where units were going to go. This project was one of the projects that the court approved. And pursuant to that approval, there was an ordinance that was adopted and a developer's agreement that was adopted. This board didn't have anything to do with the developer's agreement. That was adopted by the governing body, but the zoning ordinance came to the board for review as to consistency with the master plan. The master plan contains a housing element, which includes this project in it. So that was the history of how sort of this project came to be. And again, Mr. Chairman, you're correct. I mean, this is a response to an obligation that is imposed by the Supreme Court, as well as the Fair Housing Act that was adopted by Governor Kane back in 1985. The town has little ability or no ability to disagree with that. Now, the second part is, what is this board's role in the process? It doesn't change from normal site plan review. So this board's role is to take an application, and primarily it has to determine whether the application complies with ordinance requirements. Where it does not comply with ordinance requirements and relief is necessary, the board gets to evaluate whether the applicant has complied or satisfied its burden of proof. Here, this application, the location of the units, the density of the development, and I will defer to Jen and to Mr. Pape on this, the location and the density are specifically permitted by the ordinance. And if that's the case, well, the board may be sort of not supportive of the process that's imposed on us. Our jurisdiction is limited to the ordinance. So I guess my question for Jen, my question for Jordan, my question for Mr. Pape and his professionals is there any portion of the ordinance which is not being complied with in order to create the density and the location of the units?
No. There are absolutely, so there are no variances associated with the application. So the project as proposed, and I understand the concern, but the ordinance that was adopted allows the design as shown. There are small waivers that I'm sure Mr. Challoner will get into. We talked about the one, Sherry already covered the lighting. They agreed to put the markers. There's a couple other little things.
But that relief doesn't impact on the location or the density of the housing.
Correct.
Correct.
And Jordan, you concur with that?
Yes, I agree. We did not identify any variances. There were 3 waivers that we identified. 2 of them, Mr. Challoner already agreed to comply with. So.
And what's the remaining waiver?
One waiver I have is regarding signage, which.
So, and the signage does not impact the location or the density of the housing.
Correct.
The only thing that I would say, Ron, that maybe Stu could touch on now, because we're concerned about it, is we had identified in our letter on page 6 that there was a waiver for the end of South Sterling Drive within the 300-foot riparian buffer. Is that still the case, or has that been modified, or are you still seeking that relief? And if so, can you maybe just touch on it now? Because I think that kind of would go towards what Ron was discussing with the layout and the design.
So the applicant has applied to the DEP for riparian buffers under. Let's see if I can zoom into the area that you're identified. Give it 1 second. This is South Sterling Drive. Just to it's the roadway that parallels the southern portion of the pond. At the very end, there's a small encroachment into the cursor is following the 300-foot riparian buffer. The applicant has proposed a application to the DEP for that encroachment. We're allowed up to 6,000 square feet, but so it's fully compliant with the DEP, but it does require a waiver from the township for this small encroachment that provides adequate access to the multifamily units. So we are seeking that one small, it's like a 12 square foot encroachment for that roadway at the end of South Sterling Drive, but it's well within the state standards of the 6,000 square feet that's permitted for a 300-foot riparian buffer.
Well, I guess, Mr. Challoner, my follow-up question to that would be whether the board grants that relief or does not grant the relief. The location of the access drive does not directly impact the location of the residential units or the density of the residential area.
No, it would not. The density would still remain at 319.
All right. So then I just want to also just conclude with this. The board doesn't sit in judgment of the governing body. The governing body adopts ordinances, we apply the ordinances. Disagreement with the ordinance is not a legally cognizable reason to deny an application. It is actually what they call usurping the legislative authority of the governing body. Every portion of the government has their duty and responsibilities. Ours is not to legislate, ours is to apply, and where appropriate to grant or deny relief. So, I am not telling anyone to be dissatisfied. Certainly everybody has the right to make their own determinations as to whether they like, dislike, or don't care one way or the other about an ordinance. But what I can tell you is that it's not lawful under the MLUL to deny an application because you disagree with an ordinance. Mr. Pape, I don't know if you have anything further to add to that.
I think that was eloquently stated. We are not here we're not looking to push the envelope at all. We spent years creating this plan, presenting it to the governing body, the ordinance to the planning board, and the whole packet to the courts. And our goal is to deliver on the commitments that we've made to the township, in accordance with the commitments that we made to the township.
Mr. Pape,
Yes,
I understand what you're saying, sir, and I just can't agree on a couple of things. And whether my opinion matters or really doesn't matter, or Mr. Cucchiaro agrees or disagrees, okay? The fact of the matter is the project is high density, okay? It didn't have to be this way. You guys could have still did it with your 30% for the COA and had a nice development, half the size, but when it comes down to it, you want to squeeze as many units as we can in here because it comes down to money at the end of the day.
No, Mr. Leggio, I'm sorry. I have to interject for a second. Give me 1 second to try to summarize your frustration and your concerns. Mr. Cucchiaro.
Yes.
Actually, you know what? This may be a Jen question. I'm sorry. Jen. The township had a quantity of affordable housing units that it must comply with, correct?
Correct.
And the quantity, the 30% that this development offers a certain quantity of affordable housing units, correct?
Correct.
If let's say hypothetically, let's put on the hypothetical mode. If Mr. Leggio is right, and this developer decided to develop 50% of the amount of properties that he's proposing on this development, then that 30% of affordable housing would have been significantly reduced. And would we then have not been in compliance with the court-ordered requirement of the quantity of affordable housing units that Howell has to have?
If the projects in the plan stay as is and the overall number of this project gets reduced by 50%, and they are only obligated to provide us with 30% of that number, we would be deficient. The obligation in the third round here is 895 units, and we're only 12 units of surplus moving to the next round. So by reducing the number of units by half, we would probably be 30 plus units deficient. So that would mean that the town would have to, at some other location, come up with a project that provided those 30 units or increased density in the other projects that are in the plan. But again, I was not involved in this when this plan was formulated, but in reading the plan, of the 895 unit obligation, there's a 12 unit surplus only. So by reducing the number of overall units and reducing the number of affordable units, you put the plan in jeopardy of being deficient in the overall number. And then on top of that, and I think Mr. Pape had alluded to it multiple times, as did Mr. Cucchiaro, the plan, the housing element fair share plan, which was adopted by the planning board in 2019, and ultimately approved by the court, is taking the settlement agreement that the township entered into with Fair Share Housing Center and had been approved by the court. So there were multiple iterations of approvals that came before this applicant came before us. all of which have 92 affordable units as coming out of this project. So I understand the concerns, but we can't just reduce the number by half. That could put our plan in serious jeopardy.
Well, here's what I can tell you, Mr. Chairman, also. Let's assume the applicant says, you know what, you're right. We can make this thing, work with just half the units. Everyone will be happy. It'll look beautiful. We'll make some money. We'll go on our way. There were many property owners in Howell who wanted to be in that plan. Not all of them were taken. And the property owners who did not wind up in the plan are not all happy individuals. And I can tell you, they all monitor what's going on. And we wouldn't have an opportunity to get back to court in order to modify our plan and add another site before any one or a dozen of them would sue to knock out our approved plan from the court because we didn't comply with the requirements. And then one or more of them would get their own projects, and we would have very little to do with what the projects look like or where they went. So to allow for something that is less than what the plan provides for, and the plan doesn't care how many market rates there are, but it certainly cares about the affordables. We're not going to have an opportunity to get back to court on our own terms. We would be in court, by the end of the week. There would be all sorts of actions that were filed saying that we basically misrepresented ourselves to the court, that the court needs to remove the immunities that we have. It needs to remove the compliance that we were granted, and the town would be wide open and very vulnerable for multiples of projects.
Yeah, so I'll just summarize, Mr. Leggio. I don't disagree with your argument, and I feel in some ways some of the same feelings. My biggest concern is the fact that this was court ordered, court required. Plans were brought to the courts. Everything was packaged as a unit. And if we unravel this package, we're looking at something that's going to be a lot worse in the long run for the township. And it's terrible that it's come down to the point where it's the darn courts that have required us to do this. Frankly, I'm appalled that we have to provide affordable housing. I think that it's not a local problem. This is an overall state problem. I think it's appalling that New Jersey as a whole is not affordable, that we actually have to have affordable housing. Needs to tell me nothing more than how screwed up this state truly is. And we don't have any control over that right now.
So, Mr. P, the affordable units, will these units be paying taxes, unlike the Walters Group that's up the road from this?
Will the affordable units be paying
taxes into the town?
I think the question is the 100% affordable project that's up the road at the corner of Fort Plain and West Farms is a tax credit project, and therefore it's on a pilot. And so I think they're asking if these are going to be, if you're going to be requesting a pilot, or they're just going to be regular tax-paying units.
There's no pilot. All of the residential units would be taxed. The affordable units have a lesser value and would have a lesser tax because
of course they do. It's just, I feel that the township, the residents of Howell Township just have had enough with picking up the tab for everyone else when we already pay massive taxes in this town for the little bit of services that we get. Okay. That's coming from a planning board member. Okay. And the only reason why my concern about the density is for neighboring properties, our roadways in and out of this project, okay, going west, east, north, south, whatever way you want to go, okay, the burden it's going to put on the back roads of Howell Township and all the residents that live in these surrounding developments.
So, Mr. Leggio, let's let the applicant continue on with their presentation. There is traffic studies that are going to be brought up. We can further this discussion as well. But my biggest concern is from a board standpoint, what our professionals have already told us, which is the courts have made this decision for us in a lot of ways. So we let's continue with the application and revisit this stuff later.
Mr.
Okay.
Chair, one second. Being that I don't have to politic because I already sat on the governing body, I just want to address something with Mr. Leggio. First of all, these projects, just for your edification, gave us 30% set asides for affordable housing. 20% is the norm. So the previous governing body did everything it could to get more affordable housing and less market rate. So just understand that. And Ron, if the board was not to act favorably on this, it's a court order, what would happen? Because it's very popular to want to politic and say no, and you're not for this, and no one is for affordable housing. No one likes what it does to Howell Township, Mr. Leggio. But let's just remember what would happen if we say no just because we want to be popular.
No, I don't want to be popular.
And Ron, you could chime in on this one. Would the courts just allow it and maybe change the plan and builder's remedy, like all the disasters these towns have seen because people just want to say no instead of complying with the law and what we have?
Well, I think a number of possibilities could happen, and I'll go down a couple routes. Number one, this applicant would undoubtedly challenge a denial, a denial where there's no variance relief associated with it, and a denial that includes housing for low and moderate income individuals who have constitutional rights under the New Jersey Constitution as interpreted by our Supreme Court. So not only would there be an appeal of the board's decision with regard to an application that is in our plan, that was in the court's plan, and that is variance free, I would likely think that there would also be a New Jersey civil rights component to it, that the denial was based upon the characteristics of the people who are going to live there, being low and moderate income, and that it was a violation of their constitutional rights. That kind of a case not only, deals with, challenging the board's decision. It's a fee shifting case where if you lose any portion of it, the town is required to pay the attorney's fees of the opposing party. I would also imagine that Fair Share Housing Center, which is a statewide affordable housing advocacy group, would also get into that litigation and would purport to represent the interests of low and moderate income individuals in the region, and also bring their own action under the New Jersey Civil Rights Act. There's also portions of the law against discrimination in New Jersey, which specifically address land use decisions. And again, the low and moderate income individuals are a protected class under that statute. That statute also has fee shifting provisions. So you'd have a case that would likely have little, probability of success on the merits, with the huge downside being that you have to pay attorney's fees. I've also seen cases like that where the applicant says, fine, you have decided not to follow your plan. You've denied my application pursuant to that plan. Now I'm going to abandon that plan and ask the court to grant me something much denser, perhaps with a 20 or a 15% set aside rather than the 30% set aside. So there is not a unforeseen conclusion to this, that you'd lose the constitutional challenges. You'd have to pay the attorney's fees of multiple law firms who are billing at a private rate, something in the area of $400 or more an hour. I can tell you Fair Share Housing Center recently won a case against South Brunswick where I believe they were charging $500 an hour. South Brunswick challenged that hourly rate, and the court said, no, these are specialists and this is the prevailing rate. So in addition to that, you could also get a project that doesn't look like this anymore because it now possesses less affordable units and is more dense with regard to the market rate units. And you also get the result where you would have to find other sites to accommodate the units the affordable units you no longer have on this site. And as I stated before, you have all of the other property owners who never got into the plan, who are waiting in the wings, who would undoubtedly immediately file actions that, I mean, their attorneys have them just sitting on the shelves. It's not like, it's a fill in the blank kind of thing, where they would immediately file before the board, or before the township rather, could even get to court or figure out where other sites would be. You would no longer be in a compliance mode, you'd be a court town, and all of the expense associated with that. And you're not going to reduce the total number or the total credits that you're seeking. You would just have to pick up more sites, and you wouldn't have the ability to plan for it. It would be the sites that these developers select at densities that they convince the court are appropriate. That's sort of what I would call the parade of horribles, that could happen. And again, I don't mean to disagree with anyone. I don't agree or disagree with anyone. Not my role, to interfere with anyone's personal perspective on the Mount Laurel doctrine, the wisdom of what, any council has done, or what the jurisdiction is that's conferred by the municipal land use law. I'm just here to tell you what'll happen, under certain scenarios and what the board's jurisdiction is. And that's what I think is going to happen. So if the board does do that, I just want to be very clear on the record as to what I think, the next immediate probable, actions and consequences would be.
Yeah.
And also Miss Beam, I think this question is for Miss Beam, if she's readily available. I know she walked away. Sorry, Jen.
I just had to throw something out, sorry.
No worries. Are we, like, the Walters Group was brought up again, and I'm sure that's going to get brought up many more times during this application. The advantage of the Walters Group when I was on the board and approved that application was that was a 2-for-1 deal because of the type of neighborhood it was. So instead of us, could you please just give us a quick overview? How many units were we required by the courts? And because we did some incentives with some specialty type of
Funding.
neighborhoods, we were able to actually reduce the number of units that we truly were required to have.
So Howell Family Apartments, which is the Walters Group project that's on the corner of West Farms and Fort Plains, is 72 family rental units. The town can take credit for up to 25% of its overall obligation in rental bonus credits, which you get 2-for-1 if they're family rentals up to a certain number.
So Jen, if you could just stop there for a second. So from a layman's terms,
Sure.
let's just keep the math simple. If the courts required Howell to have an obligation of 200 affordable units, because of the type of neighborhood the Walters Group was, we were only required to provide 100 of those 200, correct? And we met the court's requirements?
Kind of, yes. I mean,
Okay.
that's very simple terms, but yeah, so there's 72 family rental units there, no market rate units as part of it, and we were able to get 144 credits against the 895 unit obligation.
So Howell did not have to have 72 more affordable housing units because of that type of neighborhood.
Correct.
Thank you.
And I think you're asking the wrong question, Chairman. How many units did we save by getting 2-for-1 credits?
Well, that's
Correct.
the
That's
thing,
what I'm trying to
'cause-
get at.
well, because typically to get 144 credits,
With a 20% set aside.
right, so you would need about 173, hold on. I got it.
Oh,
This
so
is
you're saying
complex
it's not
math. Hold on.
72, Rob, it's actually much, much higher.
It's 144 credits. Typically, to get 144 credits, you would need about 317 units total to get at 20%. So, it's a huge savings. And then, so there are no market rate units at all, which typically out of 20%, you have 4 market rate for every one, right? So I think I did that math wrong.
You did do the math wrong.
I'm sorry, it's
Jen.
500, sorry, I was like, it's 576 total units. So for every one affordable, you would get 4 market rate. So 576 total, 144 affordable would be 20%. So that kind of saved, you know, and you're
So
saving
you're
about
telling me you would've
500
had-
units from being constructed there. Plus, I know this is a sore subject, but that project qualified for funding through the state, given the timing of it, where most 100% affordable projects require a municipal contribution. I can tell you as an example, one that Ron and I are working on in a municipality not too far from here, got land plus $3.5 million from the town in order to make a project similar in size work. This had no municipal contribution whatsoever. So there were some benefits at the time of doing that, namely the number of overall units you save, plus there was no financial obligation. I know that there's like the pilot also is a sensitive subject, but I also want to just reiterate, not that it's really specific to this project, but a pilot is not an absolution to pay taxes. It's a payment in lieu of taxes. So instead of paying, you know, the whole litany of things that come on your tax bill, the school district, the county, the library, all these different things, and the town winds up getting 16% of the overall tax bill, 95% of the payment goes to the town. So in fact, the town winds up taking in more annually than it would through traditional taxation. But I'm not here to debate like the issue of a pilot. I just want to be very clear that there is a payment in that pilot acronym.
Jen, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I have to correct you. I'm bringing this stuff up because I'm not trying to debate. I'm bringing this stuff up because I believe that over the last several years, there's a huge amount of misinformation out there, and everybody thinks that there's something funky about these requirements. And in fact, the projects that we put forward are actually for the betterment of Howell, because we had an obligation, but we've been able to reduce the total number of overall housing units Howell would have had built because of the way it's been developed. So even though it sounds like 319 some homes are going on this site, it would have been significantly more had we gotten builder's remedy or something else, because we did nothing. We provided no guidance and no rules.
Chairman,
no plan.
May I elaborate a little bit more on what you're saying about clarification purposes and Mr. Leggio making all these comments about, you know, where it is and how it's there and overdevelopment. No one wants overdevelopment. That's just a pure fact. That's number one. Number two is, being that this is a Democratic mandate coming out of Trenton, that puts us all in a bad position. But I think all of our professionals and the administration before us did a pretty damn good job getting us these numbers reduced. So make no mistake about it, that our hands are tied based on the requirements that affordable housing puts in front of us, where it is built, how it is built, what it provides, economic development, transportation, sewer. There is such a big bucket list of things that have to fit the criteria that puts us in a position where you think we can just go and build wherever we want. That's not the case. There's so much that goes behind these plans and these projects, and I'm learning myself. But our professionals and administration before us, I have to say, they did a heck of a job protecting the community and protecting the public from overdevelopment of what these state Democratic mandates have done to our township. And I have to say, and Chairman, this is why I'm elaborating on what you're saying, is that, and this is not low income housing. We're about projects coming in, and these are affordable housing. I live in affordable housing, and thank goodness the township allows for it, or else I wouldn't have been able to stay here. So with that said, all the professionals that put this together and works with these applicants to get this done, they did this for the best interest of Howell, whether you agree or disagree with it or not. I appreciate it because I know what kind of work goes into it. So thank you for making that clear, Chairman. And Mr. Kuchera and Jen, thank you for all your hard work and clarifying all that information so the public is well aware of the hard work that goes into what you guys all do.
And Councilwoman, I don't want to put salt in the wounds, but Ms. Beam can attest to this, but there's another round coming.
Yes.
There's another round coming. So we're going to be going through all of this all over again for a whole nother round that the courts have required for a certain quantity of, so we better get used to understanding these terms please get educated on how the numbers were developed. It's all available online. It's
Yeah.
all in the master plan.
And
Yeah,
like
I mean,
you-
Get educated.
this will never fit people's narrative. We know that. Take the politics out of it. Let's follow Mr. Leggio's lead, vote no, and then see what the consequences are. Because it's very popular just to say no and be
Yep.
popular instead of
Well,
doing the right thing for the town. You
I'm
know,
take-
we all
I'm-
take an oath, Chairman. We all take an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the state of New Jersey. This is a Constitution mandate. As much as I don't like it, okay, we are bound by the law. So if you don't
Okay.
want to follow the law and face the consequences, let's just vote no, so we all be popular and we appease the people who don't want more in Howell Township. Nobody wants more in Howell Township. I get it. Okay, I sat up there for 8 years taking beatings because of this type of stuff. But you know what? You either do the right thing and follow the law and get the best you can, or we say no and get worse. So let the board decide. I'm done.
Well, I'm gonna have faith. I've explained it. We can
Thank you,
further
Chairman.
explain it later if it pops back up again. But I'm hopeful that people will take what I just said and get educated and understand that the numbers of affordable housing would have been significantly more along with market rate housing. So it would have been a lot more market rate housing and a lot more affordable housing in order to have met the mandates the courts
Right.
required, because New Jersey, in my opinion, is so screwed up, it's not affordable. So we have to have affordable housing mandated by the courts. With
Correct.
that being said,
Thank
I
you,
am
Chair.
going to let Mr. Pape continue on with his application. I'm sorry about that road
No.
detour that we had to take, Mr. Pape, but I think it was helpful to get that out early.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry that you're just the first
No.
applicant to come.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Mr. Chairman, I have a couple of comments on these topics. Just
So,
a
Mr. Pape, I'm sorry, but we're approaching 9 o'clock. It's up to you. Would you like to take a 5-minute break?
If I may, Mr. Chair, I have just 2 minutes of comments that are
Please do.
part of this discussion. And then I know that our court reporter is hoping to hear just the words that you just said. But I want to make this point. I have the privilege of representing the Caruso family. The Caruso family are very responsible developers. They've been developing in the state of New Jersey for many, many years. This is not the first time that we have done a project that is affordable. We don't push the envelope. We work with in this instance, we worked with the court master. You know, the court had its own master. We worked with Fair Share Housing, that advocacy group that comes in and demands for the poor. We worked with the advocacy group, we worked with the court master, we worked with your township professionals. As was stated by at least one person, your township professionals pushed hard to get the most affordable in this project. It took a lot to figure out a way that you could deliver 30% affordable. That you have to generate. Those affordables are lost leaders. There's no money that's made on them. You've got to find a way to have a project carry 30% affordable. It is very difficult. The town asked, the Carusos went and found a way to do it. All of that were the steps that were taken over the last 3.5 years. All of that's been memorialized in documents that bind us to you and bind you to us. And here tonight, we're delivering on our commitments to you. Not more, not less. And the not less is an important part, because the number of affordable units, as Mr. Cucchiaro stated a few moments ago, and Ms. Beam stated, is critical to the town meeting its obligation. We deliver less, your settlement is not intact. We deliver less, we are violating the agreement. So I make no comment at all about how difficult this is for people to handle. I make no comment. But tonight we are delivering on our contractual and court-ordered agreements with the town. With that, Mr. Chair, if we could take a short break, and then we'll come back. We have some more of Stuart's testimony.
Okay, it's exactly 9 o'clock on my clock. Eileen, So we'll come back at 9:05.
Fine.
Okay, thank you.
The board will take a short recess and we'll return at 9:05.
Okay,
The
real
planning
quick.
board will now reconvene.
Thank you. Mr. Cuchero,
Yes.
what would be your advice on time? Because we're clearly not, I don't want to be foreshadowing this, but we're not even going to get the public comment, I think, tonight.
That may be the case. I mean, it's really up to you, or the board rather, as to when they would like to cut, the applicant off tonight. This was a special meeting. We reserved it exclusively for the applicant, so that we've given them the entire night. So, we would just have to find another night, to finish it.
Me personally, it's been a couple of late nights for me. I'm kind of exhausted. The normal 10 o'clock would be okay with me.
Okay, then as we approach 10 o'clock, we will just, we'll discuss with the applicant, days that or other meeting nights. Mr. Pape, while we're proceeding, I would just ask maybe if you could, coordinate on your side while we continue to hear testimony as to, dates that are available. We meet the first and third Thursdays of the month. But, while you're coordinating that, we can continue to hear testimony.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, board members, we're ready to proceed. Stuart Challoner remains under oath. We discussed lighting and landscaping and the utilities. I'm going to ask that Stuart talk about the on-site circulation and the on-site parking. We have parking requirements that have to be met, and those requirements are really twofold. It's how many parking places and how well distributed those parking places are so that they serve their intended purposes. So Stuart, I'm going to ask if you could, I think, begin with a description of the on-site circulation, confirm that part of your plan set includes all of the turning templates of all the anticipated vehicles. Talk about them a little bit. Before we go into parking, I'm going to want to talk about Chief Lewis's participation in the design.
So the project was designed to have access point only on Fort Plains Road, even though they have slight access on Sunnyside. There will be two access points just to ensure emergency vehicles will be able to access the property. The property, again, is bifurcated to single-family homes are in the northern portion, the multifamily homes are in the southern portion. The multifamily or the single-family homes, the roadway was designed to meet RISA standards, which includes the center line radiuses to ensure that fire trucks can access the property. Two cul-de-sacs were designed, limited cul-de-sacs on the terminus ends of, you can see the proposed street along the northern section of the property. Both of those cul-de-sacs meet the RISA standards. And we also are providing a 30-foot wide cartway width that will provide on-site street parking on both sides of the street if necessary. And each of the homes is designed to have a two-car garage with driveways to have two off-street parking spaces in the driveways also. RISA then stipulates if you have a two-car garage, you're allowed to only take credit for 3.5 off-street parking spaces. So the 72 homes, if I go to an exhibit, which I just loaded, the off-street parking requirements per the RISA standards, 72 single-family detached dwellings would require 180 parking spaces. The applicant is providing, based on that number I just gave you, the 3.5 spaces per unit. The applicant under RISA standards has 252 spaces. That's 2 cars in the driveway, and then you get 1.5 cars for the garage average. The single family, or I should say the multifamily townhouse units, there's 155 townhouses. They will each have its own garage. and a driveway in front of that. Let me go back to that exhibit, just so. The townhouse units, if I zoom in, just bear with me while my computer regenerates. This is actually a new computer, and it still these images are big, so it takes a few seconds for it to regenerate. Come on, there we go. The townhouse units will have driveways in front of each unit. There'll be two off-street parking spaces in the driveway. And again, they have garages, so they'll have the ability to park in the garages. The RESA standards requires that the applicant provide guest parking for the townhouses because there will be no on-street parking within the multifamily. It's a little bit different than the single family where it's a 30-foot wide road. Because of the close proximity of the driveways for the multifamily, we designed it so they didn't have any on-street parking. There will be no parking signs in the multifamily section. And what we did provide was guest parking placed in various locations, in convenient locations for the multifamily, adjacent to the walk-in path. So, and the RESA requires a half a space per unit for the guest parking. So to get to that breakdown, there's 155 townhouse units. According to the RESA standards, there's a requirement of 2.3 spaces per dwelling unit, which would have a total of 357 spaces required for the townhouses. With the garages and the driveways, the applicant and the guest parking that we're providing, the applicant is providing 542 spaces. So just about 200 additional spaces than what would be required under the RESA standards. For the COA units, which have no garages, they are all on-street parking, or not on-street, but parking within driveways and common parking areas. The COA units require 2 spaces per dwelling units because they're an average of a 2-bedroom unit. There's a portion of them are 3-bedroom and a portion of them are 1-bedroom, but the average is 2-bedroom. So 2 spaces per dwelling unit is requirement, which has 184 spaces, and the applicant is providing 190. So when you add up all the spaces that are available, the applicant far exceeds the requirements of RESA standards for the off-site and on-site in terms of the single family and the townhouse. We far exceed the requirements for parking.
Mr. Challenger,
yes.
Can you touch on the guest parking for the affordable units as well?
So the affordable units, the 2 spaces per dwelling unit actually takes in account. There's no additional guest spaces that are required. Those when RESA develops their parking requirements, it's built in. The only time that the guest parking becomes an additional is if I was doing a townhouse development like this one, and I didn't have any off-street or on-street parking, I would have to have an additional 0.5 or half a space per unit because there's no common area parking. But once it's all common, it's 2 spaces per dwelling unit. There's no additional spaces required per RESA.
So there's sufficient spaces for both residents and then their guests as well.
That's correct. That's correct. It averages out. And again, there's also the guest parking that we're putting in for the townhouses are in close proximity. It's all within the close proximity of one another. So there's going to be ample parking for both the COA units and the townhouses. If I can, I don't know if that's too zoomed in. Whoops, wrong direction.
Mr. Challenger, you're counting the garage as part of your parking, correct, for the townhouses?
Yeah. So if it's a 2-car garage, you get 1.5 parking spaces.
So
you don't get full credit.
One of the conditions of approval, if there is an approval, would be some sort of deed restriction, as well as some mandatory language in lease agreements that the garage can't be used for storage to the exclusion of cars or for any other purpose to the exclusion of cars.
We would agree that the association documents under special conditions would include the necessary language and submit that language would be subject to your review.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Pape,
Yes.
yeah, on this plan, I don't know if it's possible if the builder's willing to do this, a playground area or a little, a picnic area or some sort of thing for all these, residents to go to besides having these walking paths and all that stuff. This is set on a back road and, it doesn't have access to any parks, local parks over there, walking distance. Is there an area that could be built out for a playground area / common area for the residents to convene? This is going to be a lot of children here.
Yeah, there's the only recreation that is provided is the walking path, and that exceeds the obligation of the applicant under the court settlement and the order.
Okay.
Mr. Challoner, I had a question, and I don't know if this will go into traffic or if you could answer this, but is there, and it may be a hard question to even answer, but is there an assumption or a calculation as far as cars per unit on a project like this? So for instance, how many cars would a single family home have versus a low to moderate income housing unit?
Yes. So residential site improvement standards has standards that I'll put back up on the cover sheet on the sheet 1 of the plan set. The off-street parking requirements is that table out of the RISA standards that a single family home requires 2.5 spaces. So they anticipate that there will be an average of 2 to 3 cars per dwelling unit. And you're required to have that amount of spaces off site or on the property. So within a driveway or the garage. Keep in mind in the areas of the single family homes, they also have the ability to have on-street parking because we designed that road with a 30-foot pavement width. The applicant did have the option to make it neighborhood access, a smaller pavement width, but the 30-foot pavement width does not limit the parking on either side of the street. So they have the ability for on-street parking. Within the townhouse area, the 2.3 spaces per dwelling unit is the highest number of spaces that RISA requires for the most amount of bedrooms. And again, because we're providing garages and driveways, they give us 3.5 spaces per unit credit, plus the guest parking that we're providing. The 155 only requires 78 guest parking spaces that are in common areas, and we're providing 122. So substantially more than what the minimum requirement for guest parking for the townhouse. And in the COA units, 184 spaces are required. The applicants provide 190. But again, the guest park spaces for the townhouses, the total, they're all in the same. The multifamily is all one area, and they're not marked in the field. This is only for market rate. These are for COA. They're all the off-street parking is available for guests and residents.
If I may, just for Mr. Challoner is using the expression RESIS and residential site improvement standards. RESIS is the I guess the nickname,
acronym.
The residential site improvement standards, which for some 20 plus years are a state standard for all residential development that overrides municipal standards. So what's in the zoning paradigm there are the exact residential site improvement standards that are applicable to each of these housing types. And the point that we wish to make is that we exceeded it in all categories, even in the COA unit. We exceeded it in all categories.
Correct.
So, if I may, Stuart, if you could just categorically answer these questions for me. We know that there'll be firefighting vehicles. Fire Chief Lewis has actually identified the firefighting vehicles. And have you created a template that shows that the anticipated firefighting vehicles can traverse the site?
Yes, we have.
And we know that there's also going to be school buses that could enter the site. Have you confirmed that the school buses can maneuver the site?
That's correct.
And the usual vehicles, cars, small trucks, vans, deliveries, you have templates that demonstrate all of those work on the road system that is here.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Just very briefly, the two intersections of your driveways to Fort Plains Road, if you could confirm that your designs include site triangles for each of those, compliant site triangles?
Yes.
And if you could just characterize Fort Plains Road in that area, so if you could comment on horizontal and vertical conditions, is it level and straight? Is it a safe roadway to accept these two roadways?
Yes, Fort Plains Road is, I'm not going to say that it's level because it actually has some slope to it, but there's no hills or valleys on the road. It slopes, the low point of the property is in the southern portion, and Fort Plains slopes up towards Sunnyside. There's clear visibility on at both access points. The side triangle easements that are provided on the plans, you can see that the proposed trees are actually staggered back to ensure that the side triangle easements remain unobstructed. They both exceed the ASHTO standards for site visibility.
Okay. And briefly, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Cucchiaro, although the applicant did have a traffic study prepared and filed, this is an of-right development, and the existing road conditions or traffic conditions are not a responsibility or obligation of the applicant. The applicant's responsibility is to design its plan to be safe and compliant, safe and adequate, but there is no obligation on this project to do any further analysis of existing roadways or traffic conditions, notwithstanding that such a report was generated to address the technical requirement of the checklist.
I would say that, Mr. Pape, just on that, just to amplify a portion of what you said, is on the safety issue, even a completely conforming site plan application, the board does and must look to the safety of the ingress and egress. So, the board is not looking at, increase in traffic necessarily, but it does require a sufficient amount of information to, come to a conclusion on the safety of ingress and egress.
We're in agreement on that, and Mr. Cucchiaro, that's why I specifically asked Mr. Challoner to comment on the design of the driveways. Mr. Challoner, I think you could also, if you point out that the applicant is widening Fort Plains Road in this area, if you could just identify those road improvements that are being made.
Yes, from the southern limits of the property, the applicant is widening Fort Plains Road. Again, there's actually substantial road widening to the new proposed curb line, which will be 15 feet off center line. And just to touch upon the board's engineer's review letter, he asked us to actually, one of the topics is the access onto Sunnyside. The applicant did prepare a developer's agreement with the township back in 2019, and the applicant is making a substantial contribution for the realignment of Sunnyside onto Fort Plains Road to enhance the safety of the surrounding road systems in this area. So not only are we our two intersections adequate and provide safe access, the applicant's also making a major contribution to enhance the existing conditions of Sunnyside, which is, I'll put the cursor to it. You can see it comes in at an acute angle onto Fort Plains Road. And the intent of the Township Engineering Department was that this realignment was going to allow it to come in more as a 90-degree intersection. So the applicant made a contribution, and we're ready to dedicate a large portion of this area once the township gives us the requirements for that.
So I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. If you would, so I made a comment that we met with Fire Chief Lewis, something that we do as a matter of course, and we went over this plan with him. I know that he, in addition to comments on the circulation, he had comments about blow-off valves and the placement of fire hydrants. You could confirm that you've amended your plans, your last version of plans had all of those recommendations of Fire Chief Lewis included.
That's correct, and they'll be resubmitted back to him to get his sign off.
Okay. Because it is not a common occurrence to, when appearing before a planning board, to talk about dollars and cents, but because it's part of the settlement, it's part of the agreements that were signed between the applicant and the town. I wanted to make the point that the applicant was asked if they would make a purchase of the property that you just described so that the town could make further improvements. The applicant was not requested to make improvements, but to acquire the property. And the applicant did agree to acquire the property at a cost of $800,000. That, because it's in the ordinance, and it kind of breaks the rule that we don't usually talk about dollars and cents in front of the board. But that was the sum that was required to acquire additional property, and just wanted the record to reflect that not only are we making the road improvements across the frontage of our property, but we have created the opportunity for the township to do that. I'm going to call it regional improvement.
That's correct.
Ken,
Yes.
I understand the developer's agreement and the contribution you made. Your traffic study report also indicated that the applicant was willing to make a contribution to the traffic light on West Farms and Fort Plains. Does that still stand?
I'm not aware of that. Let me just check with. Mr. Nicastro, it's my understanding that we're only responsible, the agreement was very clear, we're only responsible for the acquisition of the property and nothing further towards the improvements. That's the way it's written. And you caught me off guard because I was not familiar with that language at all.
It's in the traffic study. It's noted twice. It mentions that they recognize the level of traffic on that intersection. And I do understand that you made a developer's agreement with the town,
Yes.
not with the planning board, and that's okay. I know that's legal. So just basically you're saying that's not on the table any longer because
No.
of the development agreement of the 800,000 you're contributing to the land.
Yes, that my client has just shared with me in the early stages, 2017, before we entered into an agreement. It was a discussion point, but it never made it into the agreement. What we made into the agreement was the road improvements that we just outlined and the acquisition of that property for the realignment of the intersection.
Did it make it in the ordinance or just into the developer's agreement?
It's not in the ordinance, no, sir. Yeah.
I could speak up. I mean, a little bit on it. I was involved in this project in 2017. The original study in 2017 had that clause in it. When we met with your engineering department at the township level, they had a concern about the intersection of Sunnyside, and which required the purchase of 2 additional properties that were not part of the original development, lots 181 and 182. The applicant agreed that they would purchase that property and make a contribution for all offsite road improvements, whether the township uses the money for Sunnyside or the improvements to a traffic signal. The applicant agreed to for the contribution towards those improvements, plus the purchase of those 2 additional lots, which we did.
I understand that, Stuart. I just want to put it on the record that any offsite improvements that this board would have asked for is now taken away by this developer's agreement with the town.
Correct. The new developers agreement addresses that with the contribution. That's correct.
If I wanted to, as the board is familiar, before we come before you as the planning board, we take it as our responsibility to go to all of your commissions. And you'll note that there is a shade tree commission letter indicating that there were no comments. They did ask why there wasn't a woodland management plan. We actually have a woodland management plan, but the ordinance did not require shade tree, it did not require tree replacement contribution. But in all other respects, the Shade Tree Commission had no further comments with regard to our plan. We went to the Environmental Commission. Most recently, I went again in July, very briefly. And there's, from the Environmental Commission, you'll see that there's a letter indicating that there's no further comments. We spent time with Fire Chief Lewis a number of times. I'm very pleased that we earned his last letter, where again, he said the same thing. He said he had no further requirements. We do that on purpose. We want to take as much of the responsibility on the applicant, and so that you as the board members are not trying to approve something that hasn't gone through all of those reviews. We do have some points that we're asked to place on the record, and I'd like to just put a couple of points on the record about the buildings that are proposed. Revised architectural plans were delivered to the town this past summer. All of the dimensions of those buildings were shown, including the heights. I know that it's very important that the record be clear that the buildings are compliant with the ordinance requirements. There are two requirements with regard to height. The multifamily are up to 48 feet in height, and the single family are up to 38 feet in height. And the plans that were submitted have the dimensions on them, and all of the buildings that are shown are considerably less than the height requirements of the ordinance. I want the record to reflect it, but the updated plans have that information on it.
Mr. Pape, I don't know if you misspoke, but the townhouses in the multifamily, it's 45 feet in height, they're 48 feet in height. And the singles is 38 feet in height. We did have a comment in our letter that the heights were not included in the architectural plans, and we would be looking for that to be included in the architectural plan.
Yeah, Ms. Beam, your comment is accepted. The revised plans that were filed, were included the heights shown on them. So they were filed in July after your firm's last review. But we'll make sure all of them. And I did trip. It's 38 and 45. I appreciate your correcting and hearing my mistake.
No problem.
Chair, may I for a quick second, Ron, for clarification purposes, could you, who negotiated that developers agreement? Was the planning board involved in that agreement?
No, the developers, any developers agreement, not just in Howell, is an agreement that is between a governing body and an applicant. It's the planning board has no statutory standing in a developer's agreement. Some of our approvals are dependent upon developers agreements, because the agreements, if the town wants to enter into it, because such agreements can include such important details as pre-construction meetings that are beyond a board's jurisdiction, payment determination of amounts of payment, which is beyond a board's jurisdiction, phasing of certain improvements, off-site improvements, which are beyond a board's jurisdiction. But any developer's agreement, including this one, is directly between a town and an applicant. In this instance, we were not, the board was not consulted by whoever was the lead in negotiating it on behalf of the town. For Mr. Pape's statement, it sounds like they were dealing, or I'm sorry, Mr. Challoner's statement, it sounds like they were dealing directly with the former township engineer, but there was no, this board didn't have any role in it.
So basically you're saying our administration negotiated it and now the council has to agree on it, pretty much, just for clarification purposes?
No, I mean, the council did agree to it. It was executed.
Well, right,
So
that's what I'm saying. So,
Yeah.
Based on our our administration negotiating it, and when was that negotiated? Do you have a date or a time frame when that was
Well, I think,
negotiated?
Mr. Pape, you said it was executed in 2017?
No,
2000,
the developers, 2019, September 5th, 2019 is the
Okay.
developers agreement.
So then, it could have started, I don't know when it began, it could have began actually, years before that. So sometime before September 2019, but I don't know when, the discussions or negotiations began.
Okay, so, I'm sorry, so our engineering department negotiated with the developer?
Well, it was, just to clarify, the developer's agreement was first signed in November of 2018. And it was approved by the governing body by a resolution that was adopted by the governing body, actually a unanimous vote of the governing body on November 20th, 2018. The one that Stuart Challoner just referenced, that was the revision to the developer's agreement in 2019. And the lead attorney for the town was special counsel Andrew Bayer, who was brought in for that purpose.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Sure. I have two more small miscellaneous. One is there's in Ms. Beam's review letter from June 28th, there's a point that every single-family residential unit must have a storage area 12 square feet in size for on-site storage of up to 4 weeks accumulation of mandated recyclables. That information was missing from the plan, but it was added in. There's a crosshatch mark on the residential units in the garage area showing that 12 square feet. So no waiver is requested of that. The applicant met it. And there was a waiver. We have 2 signs that are 12 square feet in size, and the ordinance permits 10 square feet in size. My client has agreed that 10 square feet is adequate. We're not going to ask for a waiver for those last 2 square feet. And I believe that the applicant has now addressed the requirements. I'm losing.
Before we jump off, Mr. Pape, I just have a question for Jennifer. Jennifer, did you get the revised plans for the utility sheds being reduced from 4 feet to 3 feet?
I did not, I mean, I have not seen those plans, no.
Oh, okay, so I put it in an exhibit because that's one of your
Comments, yeah, that would be a variance, yeah.
Right, so the applicant went to the builder and asked them if we could reduce it to 3 feet, and he said yes. So we have this exhibit that was submitted, the fire equipment closet exhibit. The COA units will have a 3-foot enclosure to meet that requirement that you were graciously enough to give us a heads up on. So we went from 4 feet to 3 feet to be compliant with chimneys and overhangs.
Yep. Great, that's great. So then you would not need that relief, correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I have a mini problem. My computer is telling me that I'm dying.
They're not plugged in?
I'm plugged in and charging, but apparently I'm, with permission, if I leave my video off, would that be acceptable as we conclude the next 10 minutes or whatever we have?
Yeah, the only requirement is people who are under oath have to be visible. So it's not, you're not violating any rules if you're not visible.
An old attorney once told me that you can't swear in an attorney. It's a waste of time. You can't get them to tell the truth. So
you can swear at them.
You can swear at them, but you can't swear them in. All right, I apologize, but so that, Chair, that is the applicant's direct presentation this evening. I have available other witnesses if there were questions that required other witnesses' testimony, but that concludes the applicant's direct presentation. I would like to point out that your professionals have made themselves available to us. That's important because there were a lot of revisions to these plans that were not, there were a lot of revisions required. The plans that were submitted when we started with the submission about a year ago were not as refined as what you're seeing. And that is really the benefit, that's a benefit that this board has from having such a good set of professionals and their availability to provide guidance and direction. So we have, the last comment is, Mr. Challoner, to the extent that there are outstanding technical requirements in the CME report that just came out, could you advise the board you're familiar with that report and you can and will address the requirements of the board?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, of
Mr.
course.
Chair, I have nothing further on behalf of the applicant this evening.
Okay, Mr.
Thank
Chair,
you.
just while we're here before Mr. Pape fades away, let's find another date for them to come back. Eileen, I think we're pretty well packed on Thursday of this week. I guess our next meeting is.
We have 3 applications scheduled this Thursday. We have 3 scheduled September 23rd, along with a master plan hearing, and October 7th has 3 applications scheduled.
Which 3 are scheduled for you said the 23rd?
Yes.
Which 3 are those?
Black Rock Enterprises, which is Mr. Pape's case, 4481 Route 9 LLC, and Chris Altaver, which is a minor subdivision.
Mr. Chair, I don't know if you want to, give this application some additional time on, one of those dates. We don't necessarily have to give them, the entire night, but in order just to keep them going and starting the other applications, up to you. And Mr. Pape, if you have any, specific requests, we'd certainly, listen to that.
Mr. Pape, I would also need an extension of time.
On the record, Eileen, the extension of time is granted, and I'll follow it up with a letter. The extension of time will be to the date that is 30 days after the next hearing, and the board members reasonable will be granted.
You got that, Eileen? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk over Mr. Pape.
No, yeah, no, I know. I respect that you're volunteers. You have no idea how much I respect that you're volunteers. This meeting we were able to be very efficient in our presentation, and the board was able to cover a lot of ground too. Would the board consider another special meeting, one that could be conducted in the same manner? If there's an expense for that, we have no problem bearing that expense.
At this particular time, Mr. Pape, for me personally, I can't give you that answer right now. I've got kids about to go back to school.
Yeah.
With sports and everything else ramping up to full speed. So I don't presently know exactly where my schedule is going to be for the next 6 months, 6 to 9 months.
Okay.
So I can't commit to a special meeting right now for at least another couple of weeks.
Mr. Chair.
There's also a lot of Jewish holidays during the month of September that we have to try to schedule around. So
some of them are coming up
yes.
Next week.
Yeah, I mean, I know my daughter's swimming is going to 6 days a week. Sundays are our only day off, and we're not having meetings on Sunday.
In all fairness, we took about a half an hour of this applicant's time tonight getting a lesson on COA. So I think we should at least give him a little bit of respect back and some of that time. So I think we should at least maybe schedule something for him or try to squeeze him in relatively soon.
Mr.
Chief,
Chair,
can we take a vote, Chairman? Can we take a vote and maybe extend it to 10:30? I mean, the testimony is done. What do we basically got to hear from? We got to open it to public?
No. He said, Mr. Pape, did you say your testimony was done or just done for tonight?
My direct presentation is in. I have additional witnesses available if there are questions that were not addressed. but we're prepared to rest on the submission, on the presentation that was made.
All right, Mr. Chair, I would recommend one of two things. One, either, the board can determine whether it wants to stay late, or I would schedule them for September 23rd as the first matter. And it may just be as simple as voting or asking a few questions and voting. But if that's the affirmative testimony, I don't think that, I don't know the level of public participation.
Well, let
but
me ask you this question, Ron. We still got to do public comment, correct?
yes.
Okay. Well, I still have one question left, so I'll take the last 10 minutes and ask a question. In regards to the retention pond, Mr. Challoner, what is the proposed protection to keep people from going into that pond? And can you explain or provide testimony about the slope of the pond in case somebody does get in the pond? Are they able to walk out?
So that's a great question. So let me go to the shared screen. Share. So around the perimeter of the pond, we have we installed fencing. The fencing will be post and rail with chain link embedded into the post and rail. We kind of like that appearance. We do a wood post and rail fence with a black chain link to ensure that people couldn't, or children don't crawl between the posts. And that is around the entire perimeter of the pond, and have access gates for maintenance. The slopes of the pond are, for safety purposes, are mandated by the DEP. You're required to have 3-to-1 slopes, and then at the areas where the water levels are, you're required to have safety ledges. And 2 safety ledges are installed, one at the water level and one just below the water level. So if somebody was in the pond, they'd be able to easily walk out onto the slope. And again, a 3-to-1 slope is 1 foot vertical for every 3 foot horizontal, which is a very gradual slope for the grass area. And I was just updated that the fence will be post and rail PVC, not wood, but it will be a PVC fence with a black chain link mesh embedded on the waterward side of for safety. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have a few questions as well on the engineering side.
Go ahead. Sounds like we're at least going to 10:30, so let's go.
All right, Mr. Challoner, you are going to provide a final plat, correct? Because we have not received one yet.
I did submit a final plat. It's at the board. It's part of our exhibits. But yes, I'll make sure that you have it, a copy. If it didn't get to you, I will directly send it to you. But yes.
Was only submitted as an exhibit. It wasn't submitted paper to the board. Sorry.
You need to submit that as a formal submission, not just an exhibit.
Yes, I'll take care of that.
Jordan, you got muted, so we're not hearing you.
Oh, I did?
No, Jordan.
Jordan.
Oh.
Okay, thank you. Do you plan on phasing this project, or is it all in one phase?
Yes, there will be a phase portion of the project, and I'll submit the phase and plan to you for approval. Basically, all the infrastructure for the drainage will be installed and the sewer, but the roadway system will be phased, and it'll be 2 phases. There'll be 2 phases for the single family and 2 phases for the multifamily.
Okay, so you'll submit that, and then
Yes.
you'll meet the criteria for construction of the single families versus the affordable units?
Yes. The single will submit a constructions to ensure that the affordable units are being built in the appropriate number of units being sold.
Okay. You mentioned that there will be an HOA, and they'll be responsible for the wet pond, correct?
That is correct.
And then you're also proposing dry wells to handle your groundwater recharge requirement, correct? So that would be dry
Yeah,
wells located in the
yeah.
single family?
Yes, the
properties.
DEP is requiring, you know, the amount of infiltration in order to meet the requirements. Since it's a wet pond, we're installing dry wells.
Okay, will those be the responsibility of the single family homeowners?
For the single families, yes, it would be part of the single family homeowners. Easy, they'll be on fee simple lots.
As far as trash collection goes, can you just explain the number of trash enclosures, the locations, and if it's adequate to serve all of the multifamily units?
So the multifamily units, the townhouses will have trash storage inside the garages. They'll bring their cans out to the streets. The COA units, which do not have garages, we provided 2 locations for trash enclosures. And they're at the terminus of the parking that fronts those COA units, both on the west and the east side of that. And we sized them to be adequate for the COA units. But the townhouses, the multifamily townhouses will have storage within the garages.
Okay, and then you have a detail for that, I think you said. Can you provide that on the next plan revision?
Yes, it's on the architectural. They were identified in the architectural plans, but I'll submit them to you. Yes.
Okay, and then can you provide a truck circulation for the trash enclosures as well as the fire circulation that you mentioned earlier?
Sure, I'll forward that to you. Absolutely.
Do you anticipate that any fences will be installed or permitted to be installed for the townhome units?
We're not proposing any fences for the townhouse units. So if it does pop up, you mean like privacy fences that extend out from behind the buildings?
Yeah, if each individual resident would like to install a fence in their rear yard, maybe to separate from their neighbor.
Yeah, you know, no, at this time, no, we're not seeking that. I don't have that proposed. No.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about with the privacy fences. Prior to the next meeting, I'll have that conversation with the developer to see if that's anticipated, but no. they're not proposed.
Help out a little bit here. I can help out a little bit on that one. We do want the right to have privacy fences, but not fences that create enclosures. Just the fences that are perpendicular from the building out, just to create a privacy area. So
Okay, that would probably be determined by each resident, correct? It wouldn't be uniform across all units, but as residents would want to install that?
We'd like to have that option. That's correct.
That'll be in the HOA documents.
It would be under special conditions in the HOA documents.
Okay, with regards to the road widening along Fort Plains Road, you're providing a 15-foot cartway half width. It appears in the master plan it would require a 20-foot cartway half width.
Actually, I believe you're 100% correct. For some reason, the plan is the plan that was submitted. I think we've already revised the plan to have the 20-foot half width. I just wasn't, when I was looking at the exhibit said 15, but you're correct. It's 20 foot. We are widening it to 20.
I believe the latest plan I have shows a 15-foot cartway half width and a 30-foot half width, which is acceptable. We just need to increase the cartway half width by 5 feet.
That's correct. Yes, you're correct.
Okay. As far as stormwater goes, there were some questions about completing test pits. You certainly completed a lot throughout the site, but there is a requirement for the number in the basin, which is part of our technical review. I know you already agreed to comply with our technical review, but I just want to make sure that you will complete additional test pits in the specific area of the final wet pond basin to demonstrate seasonal high, mainly seasonal high because it's not intended to be an infiltration basin.
Yeah, I'll be fine to submit the test results to you, or do additional tests, but it is going to be a line basin, which will prevent groundwater from coming up as much as water from draining down. I mean, it's going to be almost like a pool. It's lined, so it's not going to, the groundwater is not going to affect it either plus or negative.
Yeah, just enough to satisfy the BMP manual, and then.
Okay, I'll submit the results to you. Not a problem.
And there was a question about the percolation, perk results throughout the site. I didn't see it in your report. It might have been separate. I'm not positive, but you'll just need to supply filtration results for all the dry wells that you're proposing.
Not a problem. I'll get them to you.
Okay, thank you. That's actually all I have. Thanks a lot.
Do any of our other professionals have further comments they'd like to discuss?
I just have a couple quick things. Mr. Pape, are you agreeing to comply with the town's lookalike requirements? I know you submitted multiple models in the architectural drawings, but no residence, can be the same, whether it's next to or across.
Yes, we're aware of the specific ordinance on the books in Howell that prevents, we'll call it the no lookalike ordinance. Yes, we are aware of it and we will comply.
And then similarly, I guess this is also for Mr. Challoner, that if there's decks that are going to be provided, are there going to be decks on the single family homes?
I would say yes. I would anticipate that would be, and they would be required to meet the township standards in bulk requirements.
Right, which requires them to be set back about 15 feet from the property line?
That is correct.
Okay, and then the only other thing I have is there were some discrepancies on your plans relating to lot 2 and 53, as well, and how they compare to lot 3 and 54. Can you revise those for me, please?
Yes, I'll take care of that.
That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Is it the responsibility of the homeowners association to put together a snow removal plan, or is it just up to the township because they're township owned roads to kind of figure it out as they go?
Well, the snow removal for the private roadways and parking lots is the responsibility of the association, but not the private roads, not the public roads. I'm sorry.
Mr. Pape, just to clarify on those public roads, the storm portions of those public roads are still private and still maintained by the HOA.
Mr. Challoner, I think I know the answer, but I don't want to misspeak. Mr. Challoner, can you assist? The stormwater.
Yes, all the drainage in the yard areas are going to be owned and maintained by the homeowners association. The drainage that falls within the right of way of the public road, I guess that's a gray area. But I mean, the maintenance of them is going to be the homeowners association. They're going to have to go around and there's going to be a maintenance manual for this project that's going to be approved by your township professionals and the DEP. And the homeowners association is going to have to adhere to that maintenance, which will be including the inspection and cleaning of those structures.
In the private roads, because you said it was a gray area.
And the public road. I don't know how I could bifurcate it out. So
yeah, goes to the same basin.
Yeah. It's in our best interest that they stay clean and free of sediments. Otherwise, it all ends up in our basin.
Missing grates, that kind of stuff, that'll still be, those will all be your HOA requirements in those public roadways.
I would say that's correct.
Okay.
I had a question. Just to clarify the HOA, the affordable housing is part of the HOA, or are they exempt from that?
The affordable housing will be members of the homeowners association. Yes.
Thank you.
So just to be clear, there's going to be one homeowners association or two?
I believe that we're going to have, I have it written down. There will be two. There will be two.
the responsibilities for the common areas, and I assume there's two being, one will be exclusively the market rate units and the other will be the affordable units?
Actually, there will be one association, a homeowners association for the single family, and there'll be a condominium association for the townhouses. And my client is, and there'll be a third condominium association for the affordables. And there'll be participation back and forth amongst them in like a regime.
Well, who's going to be responsible for, maintenance of common areas? Do they each have common areas? Is one of them going to have the common area? What about the basin maintenance?
Mr. Cucchiara, I have not worked with the client on putting together the association outline. Not hard. I'll do it promptly and I'll submit it to you and we can discuss it when we return. Not complicated, just didn't go there.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Believe that there'll be one that will be central, and the one that makes most sense is the one for the townhouses, and the others are participants, but I'm going to go over it with our client.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. As the boards can, on the 23rd, notwithstanding that I have an application on your agenda, I also have another application that's court ordered elsewhere, and my partner was going to cover the 23rd. I'm not comfortable with another attorney stepping in, even a competent.
Well, Mr. Pape, if you could hold that for a second. I mean, Eileen, is there any way that we can get them on the second?
Chairman, may I step in, please?
Yeah.
We're already here. It's 10 o'clock. The public's already there waiting. There's not many people on. I'd like to make a motion to continue the meeting and hear the public. Can we start there? I mean, they're coming back on a whole night.
I can tell you emphatically that if we go past 10:30, I'm signing off. Now you have a quorum and you guys can continue the meeting, but I am so exhausted. I literally am having a tough time holding my eyes open. I would agree. I would like to finish this application and be done with it tonight, but I'm okay with starting the public. If we want to take a chance of starting the public and then canceling, I'm just afraid that we're only going to get halfway through the public.
Well,
and then we're going to have people that are going to be disenfranchised because we stopped at 10:30.
Well, we'll open it up at the next meeting again.
Yeah,
I'm recommending that we add them to the September 2nd meeting and take a chance that we can get them in.
Brian, if we're gonna go to 10:30, I suggest we just start with the public. We'll hear some comments. And then you could always open it to the public again on the September meeting.
As long as you guys are comfortable with that, with that agreement.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to make the motion because the public have been out there waiting, listening to everything, and
There's no motion that's necessary. If the chairman, as the hearing officer, wants to do it, let's do it. But let's open it and get started.
Okay, fair enough. Hard stop at 10:30, Chairman.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Okay, so Mr. Pape?
Yes.
Can we open it to the public?
Mr. Chair, it's your hearing. We have no objection.
Okay, thank you. So with everybody understanding that at 10:30, we are stopping this meeting, we are going to open it to the public and try to get as many people in the public in to speak. So with that being said, I will open this to the public. Eileen, can you please explain the rules? We typically allow, about a minute and a half in between speakers in order to allow people to raise their hands to get the next speaker up. And if we go a minute and a half and nobody raises their hands, then we're going to assume that there's nobody else in the public that would like to speak. Also, can you please describe the rules if they happen to be on the phone, how they can go ahead and unmute themselves, or actually how they can raise their hands and also unmute themselves.
Okay, I think everybody actually just heard you, but if any member of the public has questions or comments on this application, which I think we're doing both now, correct? You can use the raise your hand feature. And if you're on the telephone, the raise your hand feature is *9 to raise or lower your hand. And it's *6 to mute or unmute yourself. So if anybody has questions or comments, please use the raised hand feature. We'll bring you in one at a time. You will be sworn in and need to give your name and address. You also need audio and video capabilities if you're testifying.
Thank you. Has anybody raised their hand?
Not yet.
Okay, it's 10:08 by my clock.
I do have one member.
Karen,
Christina.
Hello.
Hardison.
Yes. Do I need to start my video?
Yes, you do.
Okay.
And then I just need to begin by swearing you in. So if you just raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, if you could just state and spell your name and give us your address.
Sure. It's Christina Hardison, ChristinAHardison. I live at 4 Gristmill Road. So
Okay, go ahead.
I guess I have 2 questions. So I recently moved here, just literally a couple months ago, I moved into this home. And so I guess I'm behind a little bit. So my questions would be, 1, I'm assuming this is just a review and you guys are taking questions from the public, but it's number 1, it's a done deal. This is absolutely happening. Number 2, my question would be, how would that impact, or how would this influx of, I guess I would say, homeowners or renters impact the school system? And then 3, one thing I've noticed, because I'm actually on Sunnyside, so I'm on Gristmill, but I also am on Sunnyside, if that makes sense. I'm on a corner property. And when I say that people are throughout the entire day driving triple the speed down the road, I'm not exaggerating. So I guess my concern and fear, having a baby, dogs, is there anything that is going to be considered to monitor now probably at least 500 plus cars that would be driving past my home? So sorry, I've never done this before. I don't know if I'm allowed to ask 3 questions consecutively like that.
Thank you for your
Well,
question.
one, you can ask as many questions as you'd like, and you can make
Okay.
whatever comments that you like. So I would turn it over to Mr. Pape to offer, give you first crack at you or Mr. Challoner or anybody else from your team answering the questions.
well, the speed of vehicles moving on the public roadways is nothing that we can address or control. And the influence of the homeowners and their children in the school system is something that is not, it's not within the jurisdiction of the board, and it's not something that this applicant is capable of addressing, or nor are they obligated to. Was there another question that I missed?
Mr. Pate, may I, hi Christina, how are you?
Hi.
I'm gonna allude to the chief, because the chief of police is on the call, and I'm not sure, but they're pretty good with monitoring speed, especially when there's a big concern. So chief, would that be something we can do and get the traffic guys out there once
Absolutely.
once
Christina,
this opens? Yeah.
Yeah, Christina, we do this all the time. So we have what's called RTCs, response to citizen complaints, and you can get on that list. I could take it right here from you. And what we do is the sector car that's responsible for that area during their downtime between calls, we call it their discretionary time. They would sit and conduct radar and speed enforcement on there. We put out speed trailers. We have different, other type of speed enforcement activities that we can do out there. So that's not a problem. Obviously, you're saying that it's a problem now before this development even exists. So it's something that I can address tomorrow with my traffic safety unit to start getting some cars out there, get some increased police activity out there. So I'll do that. You don't even have to do any type of request. I'll do that via just your comments tonight. I'll get that working and get some police presence out there. And when this development does go in, then obviously, that's going to be something that we're going to have to continually monitor.
Okay, thank you.
Is it okay?
And Mr. Pape, with regard to the school children, obviously it's not something the board can base its decision on, but was there any economic impact statements that were submitted in conjunction with the site being selected?
There was not, Mr. Cucchiaro. I just switched computers and I'm going to turn off the one that's got 1%. And if you could let me in.
I just
See it?
have.
Yeah,
Yes,
so
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right.
Recording in progress.
Can I ask a question too? And this is actually part of this question.
Hold on, Councilwoman.
Yeah.
Ken's got to turn off the other computer.
Yes, he does.
Yes, he does. Okay.
Okay. So like when the Howell family apartments came up, I thought I recall something that a report was done or something, a consensus or something that was able to give us an idea of how many estimated family members and children would potentially move into the Howell family apartments. And then obviously if it would impact our schools. I don't know that our schools are overcrowded now since we did a redistricting not too long ago. And I don't know if that's a question you could address with.
Well, that's typically in the economic impact statement. That's the document I was asking about. Yeah.
Okay. So is that obtainable through Mr. Pape or is that something?
Well, I was asking whether it's not required under statute or, any decision to be performed. So I didn't know whether that was part of the process in this instance. And Mr. Pape was in the middle, was starting to answer it, and then he switched computers. So Mr. Pape, I think you started, but let's just start again with your answer.
Yeah, no, there was no economic, there was no, we were not required to do an economics report.
We can see you fine, Mr. Pape, if you want to leave it right there.
Okay.
We just got your koala bear in the background, that's all.
That's
beyond, the impact to the schools, Mr. Pape, though, for the benefit of the member of the public, not everybody, gets into the nitty gritty of the law like we do, and if they did, they wouldn't need us. But, if you could just give a brief explanation on the law of why it is, that, the presence of children in a development or the impact is generally beyond the jurisdiction of a board to consider an approval or denial. And at best, sometimes we do have a economic impact statement for informational purposes, but why it is that, there are specific laws and rules against that.
Well, Ron, you're going to tax my ability to answer, but I mean, there's case law going back to the 60s that separated this Board of Education requirements and zoning requirements, and the economic impact of potential family size is not something that the board is allowed to consider. I think that's the best answer I can give you.
Just to jump on that, it's called fiscal zoning in the law, and basically the courts consider it to be discriminatory against children to take into account their presence and their impact and their needs on a municipality in the decision-making process as to whether to grant or deny an application. They find it in New Jersey to be, unconstitutional discrimination.
Does that answer your questions, Christina?
Yes. Well, the first question was just to clarify, this is 100% happening, right? There's nothing in question here. The project was proposed, approved, and is going to move forward no matter what. It's just a matter of working out some of these details that you've discussed tonight.
I don't know how the rest of the board's gonna vote.
Okay, so there's still a
But-
vote. Okay.
There's still an official vote,
Well,
but I can
Mr.
tell
Chair,
you
Mr.
that,
Chairman, if I could just answer from a legal perspective, there is still a vote, but our vote is limited to determining whether they comply
What's your
with the
passcode?
ordinance or not.
Got
So
it.
we can't say like we like it or dislike it and vote that way. It's focused on whether they comply with the requirements in the ordinance.
Got it. So if they don't say they do not comply based off of the hearing tonight, then my assumption is they're given a period of time to revise,
Well, they're
present again, and move
they're-
forward.
there are different ways to do it. So if they don't comply, the law permits them to ask for relief, but they have to prove why they're entitled to relief. It's not as of right that they get it.
Okay.
Or, as you heard, we identified certain things they didn't comply with and they agreed to comply. So they withdrew the request for relief and agreed to comply. But generally, it could go that they resubmit something or they have the right to ask for relief.
Okay. And then, sorry, I know that I've taken up time and I hope no one else has their hand raised. My only other question is, are there limits at once construction starts, or I guess I'd say hypothetically, if construction starts, is there a limit as far as when they can start and finish, or is that just based off of like the Howell Township noise ordinances that are already in place?
We not only have noise ordinances, I think we have other ordinances about the hours within which construction can take place. So, it's both noise and that the amount of time, in terms of days or months, is dependent, but they can't work, like at 11 o'clock at night, on the property, and we have a start time in the morning as to when they can start also.
Okay. I guess just like being that, like my property directly backs up to this project. So I guess I'm thinking between having a newborn and also dogs that are skittish and working 100% remote, my, I guess, fear is I just moved into this home. I had no idea this project was going on. And it's like, is there going to be constant construction noise while I'm trying to, just do my everyday working, cooking, cleaning, I don't know, because I've never been next to a construction site of this sort. So I'm trying to understand, like, what is the impact? If this is going to be something that impacts and I can't host like my meetings,
Mr. Pape,
then I have to move.
Mr. Pape, do you or one of your professionals want to tackle that?
Well, I think that I can begin with the legal answer, and that is the township has noise ordinances, and the noise ordinances have different times of the day. And it's typically about 7 a.m. until I think it's 6 or 7 p.m. where there's one standard, and then there's the overnight standard, which is very quiet. So we must abide by the ordinance. We must. And you also have on the books, you have construction ordinance activity that restricts what can occur on the weekends and what can occur after hours. And on the record, we'll stipulate that we can agree to, and we will agree to abide by all of those standards.
Okay.
And Christina, just from my experience, our developers and our businesses, they're part of the community. They want to, make sure that they're satisfying all their neighbors. We had the same problem with Home Depot with Toscana that went up in the back there. A lot of the residents of Toscana were complaining about Home Depot, and that's right down the street from this. So, and we talked to Home Depot complied. They rescheduled when their trucks came in, when their dumpsters were emptied. So, and I'm sure Mr. Pape with Caruso, they would do the same thing for you if it deemed to be a problem.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Mr. Pape,
Yes,
Pape, I think
Chief,
we have an
thank you. And the
ordinance.
answer is yes.
Mr. Pape, I think we have an ordinance now that says that new developers have to have a sign on the property, what's coming, what the working hours are, and a phone number for notification if there's a complaint. I'm pretty sure we passed that, but can we check? And if it is there,
Sure.
will you comply?
That is
course.
correct. There is a requirement.
Of course, if it's on the books, of course, and appreciate you bringing it to our attention.
Yeah, there isn't. They just said there is an ordinance, so we want to comply with that.
Sure.
So Christine, you'll have a number. If there's a complaint, they'll tell you the working hours. It's a pretty good sign that they got to put on the sign on
Okay.
on the property.
Okay, thank you.
Does that include your questions, Ms. Hardison?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
We now
Okay.
have Daniel Anachin.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, if you could just turn your camera on though, sir.
Okay,
I
yeah.
see. I just need to swear you in first. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state and spell your name and give us your address.
Okay, my name is Daniel Anachin. That's Anochin. My address is 33 Weaverville Road in Freehold. However, I'm the legal guardian of Karen Anachin, who lives at 210 West 5th Street.
Okay, just before you get started, Mr. Pape, you have any objections?
No.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Okay, so it's my understanding that there's an easement on my grandmother's property with the developer working on this project. And so I just have a couple questions about that. I've only been her guardian for the last couple of months, so I'm not entirely sure how that agreement came into place. And also, once these phases start happening, what can I expect to see from that property as far as, are trees going to be cut down? Will there be heavy machinery on her property? Because there is a manhole in her front yard, like in the grass.
Actually, the improvements are already been installed. So the fact that you haven't seen them, it's, we did a good job. The sewer main has already been installed on the property. We purchased the easement from your family. And that main already extends. There's no manhole on her property. It just runs under it.
So no further disturbance.
No further disturbance on your property.
We know more. There's like, if I were there, I wouldn't see anything in the woods there. There's not gonna be trees cut down in like the immediate eye view.
They'll be off your property where we're going to extend from the manhole that we installed to this property. There'll be a force main. There will be a trail when they put the equipment, get the equipment to put the force main in the ground. So there'll be some disturbance to the woods that's on our property, but there'll be no further disturbance on your property.
Okay. And then about when did you buy this easement from my grandmother?
I don't, we were not involved in that, and I don't have those answers. I can get, your grandmother sold an easement to our clients, but I don't have that information.
Okay, I'm only asking because my grandmother has been incapacitated for years, so I'm not sure how like any of this came to be, how she could have.
Okay, well, if
anything like that.
You're welcome to reach out to me tomorrow, and I'll get you a copy of the easement that was sold.
Okay. All right, I guess that's all I got.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anachin. Elaine, any more from the public?
Yes, I have Tina Smilek.
Okay, Ms. Smilek, are you on camera?
Yes, Tina Smilek, 33 Charles Street, Howell, New Jersey. This is
Ms. Smilek, are you intending to testify or just ask questions?
questions.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, the first thing is, I just want to say I'm very disturbed about how these meetings
Ms.
are running.
Smilek, you just said you were not going to testify.
I'm not
Being very
testifying, I'm just telling you.
You just said you're very disturbed.
you're
That's
gonna end the-
testifying, so you need to, and that's fine, but you need to put your camera on and I need to swear you in.
Okay,
Okay, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
yes.
Okay, if you could just state and spell your name again and give us your address.
Tina, last name is Smilek, Smilek.
And just the
Address is
address again?
33 Charles Street, Howell, New
Okay.
Jersey.
Go ahead.
So I'm really having a problem with people saying these meetings are going to end at a certain time and then they get extended afterwards. I actually got off knowing that it was ending at 10 because the chairman stated he was up a lot of hours and they said that you were going to redo this meeting. This also happened at the last zoning board meeting. There has to be a rule where if you're going to state at a certain time that the meeting's going to close, that you stick with that, because it's not fair to the residents when you don't do that. How many residents now are not going to get a chance to ask questions that signed off?
No, we're not completing this application tonight, Ms. Smiley.
Okay, well then
But
can I reserve my questions then for the next meeting? Because I
Absolutely.
would like to see the parts I missed since I got off.
Absolutely, because we're not going to finish. It's already 10:28. We're not going to finish the public portion.
Well, I
Okay,
also
so
just
there's no
want to,
vote
I think it's important to say that when the board says, you know, we're going to end at 10, it doesn't mean the hearing's going to be over. So members of the public who signed off early might have missed the announcement of when it's going to be carried to as well. So I would just say to members of the public, if you have an interest, you know, I would encourage you to stay on, because you would miss the, you know, the most important part, which is when it's being continued to.
Well,
which
no,
we have-
because you record it and we can watch it the next day and I can figure out all that stuff. That's why I just figured I'd get off, because I'm going to rewatch it again
Well,
tomorrow.
I'm not gonna speak as to why you got off. I'm speaking to members of the public and making recommendations. You know, I don't want anyone to miss, you know, the statements.
Well, if you don't want anybody to miss it, there
Ms.
should be
Smilik,
no.
I'm not here to debate
end at
with
10
you.
o'clock.
I
That's
can
my only
make
thing.
a
Thank you. I will
recommendation to
talk to you at
members
the
of
next meeting. Thank you for allowing me to speak at the next meeting. I'll ask my
got it.
questions then.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I just, yeah, people can speak over me. That's fine. I can wait. You know, I'm perfectly willing to wait. But I just want to reiterate that when you say that, you know, members of the public, you know, I still encourage them to stay, to watch, and to find out when the hearing is being carried to. Thank you.
Fair enough. Thank you. Okay, with that being said, we're at the 10:30 mark. And
When would
I'm
you like to
assuming-
carry it, sir?
I'm assuming it's too late to notice to get you on the September.
Nobody,
2nd.
you don't need to renotice. If you carry it to a date certain, that is the notice. That's why I was saying that people who are interested, you know, shouldn't sign off, because you might miss the announcement.
And we may
So
not
you
get
can,
the- and we may not get the recording out in time if we say do September.
Mr. Chairman, if anybody who wants, you know, anyone who has an interest, you know, I can't be more clear that, you know, they should stay on. They don't have to, but that's why I encourage it. So with that said, we just need to select the date.
So,
And
we
you
have
can't-
no resubmission. Clearly, we will be making responsive resubmissions. But right now, we have no specific resubmissions that must be in, so we don't have the 10-day rule. If you wanted to go to Thursday, the 2nd, I think that we're all available. Stuart's not, and Stuart's critical. Stuart's.
Yeah,
not.
I'm out of state, so I won't be here Thursday.
Okay.
I mean,
What's next?
You can't do September 23rd. Do you want October 7th?
To everyone who's on our team, could you let me know if October 7th is a date that works? So Stuart, you're critical.
yes, I'm good.
Okay. Mr. Caruso, give me good. Okay. So look, it looks like we're good to go on October 7th. If you could continue us to October 7th without renotice.
Okay, so the application of FP Howell, case number SD-2990, be carried to the board's October 7th, 2021 meeting, which begins at 7 o'clock. That meeting will still be a virtual meeting. The directions on accessing the virtual meeting will be available at least 10 days prior on the township's website. All documents associated with this application are also available on the township's website for inspection and review. There will be no further notice to property owners. If you receive the notice for tonight's meeting, you will not receive another notice. So I think that's it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman, to you and to all the board members and board professionals who scheduled and carried out this special meeting. On behalf of the applicant and personally, I thank you. I look forward to seeing you again on October 7th. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good
Thanks,
night.
sir.
Okay, so I guess, take a motion to conclude the meeting.
I'll make a
Motion
motion.
to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
See you Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you.